All right, welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shooting Review Series. Today we're joined by the founder of Extreme Championship Wrestling, Todd Gordon. Todd, thank you for having us here in your office.
Rob, it's a pleasure, always.
Brings back some memories, actually.
A lot of memories. I remember when you were a kid.
All right, I guess my first question would be, how did you get involved with the wrestling business?
Okay, that's the easy one. Started out when I was listening to Joel Goodhart's old wrestling radio program on, I guess, WIP.
Right.
And I called Joel up one day. He was going to do some advertising with him. Then we got to know each other a little bit, and I ended up becoming a silent partner in his company. But Joel unfortunately went bankrupt and really didn't have a wherewithal in terms of the business aspect of the business. So he would put on shows at the Civic Center with $25,000 in talent, and he'd do a $20,000 house, which most independent promoters would love to do a $20,000 house, but not if they're spending $25,000 in talent. So Joel ended up, I did some ring announcing for him, and was his silent partner, and then when he went bankrupt and kind of disappeared and left everybody in the lurch, there was this big void there. And one day I got a phone call from, I guess it was Bob Ortiz, and he said, can Larry Winters and I and another guy who ended up being Stevie Wonderful, became a manager for us, come down and talk to you? And they sat right here in this very office where you two are sitting, and they said, would you consider starting up a promotion? I said, nah, it wasn't for me. They said, what's involved? All was involved was getting a license. And they said, oh, we can get Schmidt Sports Bar because Joel used to run it and so on and so forth. So I said, okay, let's give it a shot. So I went out and got a license, put together our first show, and that was at Mike Schmidt Sports Bar, and that was the beginning of what was a long journey into from bar show to pay-per-view.
Were you aware that Joel was having a lot of money problems at the time?
Yes. I also told him not to take the ticket money for the last show because I knew he wasn't going to be able to afford that last show.
That was one of my questions. Were you aware that he was going to split with all the money? Or?
Yes. And that's when Joel and I departed company before he did that.
How did the network find you when you did the story? I guess they did a special on wrestling, and then your family was featured on it. How did they find you?
How did you know about that? I didn't remember.
I watched that.
It was the Connie Chung show,
yeah.
Or Connie Chung's segment of 2020 or something like that. And Donnie Allen works for Comcast. Now at the time, he knew me just from Joel, and I was really more of just a fan, as I said, a silent guy. And he said, we need somebody in the Lower Merion area for Comcast to do let someone come in and do their family watching a pay-per-view.
Right.
I said, hell, I'll get my kids on TV. Now, sure, it'd be great. I love it. So they came in. They were there for like 14 hours for all of about 3 minutes that we were on tape for. And it was a fun experience for the kids because they'll always have that tape of them when they were little going, Hogan, Hogan.
Right.
And so it was fun.
How did the idea of ECW come about?
The idea of the Extreme?
Well, no, it was Eastern Championship Wrestling.
I was only planning I wanted to make a territory up here, sort of like a Memphis territory. The idea of being the tri-state area, so on Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And just try to keep a local promotion that we could build into a weekly thing. My original goal, believe it or not, was to have a Saturday morning live event, just like Lawler was doing down in Memphis.
Studio Memphis.
Yeah, and we're the same people be there every week, and hopefully from there we could kind of springboard it. Never expecting that it was going to snowball the way it did.
What were some of the first bar shows like that you promoted?
They were fun. I mean, the bar shows were great. The very first one we did, we came right at them with some hardcore angles and started doing things that, we wanted to say.
Right.
It was like a fans promotion from the very first day, before even any of the big names came along. And we started, the only names we brought that weren't local hands were Snuka, Ivan Koloff, and Don Morocco.
Right,
that was it, and no one else. And Morocco was a friend of Bob Ortiz's, and he had frequent flyers from his wife who worked for the airline, so he always got a free ticket in from Hawaii. And it gave him something to do because he was just laying around being a beach bum. And as I said, we started, it was going to be just a local thing. And little by little, we went from one building, then we ended up working the Chestnut Cabaret, which was up at 30th Street. And that was a disaster, our first show there. I don't know if you know that story or not.
No, go ahead.
Go to run we run only the Mike Schmidt Sports Bar and a couple boys clubs up in Northeast Philadelphia. Tabor, and there was one other one, I can't remember the name of it. Chestnut Cabaret. Big new venue, we're going to hopefully hit a new audience, and et cetera, et cetera. Like 3 days before the show, the owner said to me, you realize no one under 21 can come to the show. I said, what are you talking about? Half our audience is under 21. Our audience is all 200 people to start with, but a lot of them are minors. He said, no, we serve alcohol here, they can't come in. I said, well, I do it at Mike Smith's Sports Bar all the time. They serve alcohol. Nope, can't come in. So now I've got to turn around and tell all these people who bought tickets they can't come in. We got there, and of course there was literally only 30 people there. So I had to come up with a reason why they couldn't come in. So we had Tigress was her name.
Right.
We ended up having her stripped of her top in the bar. So it was the first quote-unquote nudity in a live event, and that was the reason we said no one under 21 was allowed in. We got killed that night because there's 30 people there. And a sidebar story from that is that at the end of the night, you know, each guy was coming over to me, oh, boss, I'm really sorry about you getting killed. You get it next time, you get them next time, on and on and on. The last check I handed was to J.T. Smith. And he looked at me and he said, I can't take this check. I said, everybody else took theirs. Of course you can take your check. He said, no, you got killed tonight. I can't do it. And he ripped the check up.
Wow.
That day, I hired him to work here at Carver Reed in my jewelry store.
I'm going to talk about JT later on.
Because I said, this is one honest guy. I said, anybody who would be that thoughtful, I mean, it was so unusual in this business that someone wasn't looking just for the buck, that I immediately took to him and I made him, as I said, an employee here at the store.
Now, how did you hook up with Eddie Gilbert? How did he get involved?
Eddie Gilbert, how did I first get involved with Eddie? I guess I met Eddie at the show that John Clark did a show at a hotel.
Okay.
And he wanted to bring in two promotions. Dennis Carluzzo's indie shows from Jersey, who was partnered with Larry Sharp, and ECW. And Gilbert was on that show that weekend. It was a convention he did, a whole fan convention.
That's the first time I met you, too.
Yeah, it's the first time I met. That's right. We met for the first time. I met Eddie for the first time. We got to talking a little bit, and I told him what I was trying to do up here. And he was very interested because he wasn't doing much of anything at the time, and basically asked me for the book. Said, I can help you do TV, I can lay out a format, and this was things that were all foreign to me because TV was our next step. We never even thought about television. That wasn't even beyond my scope at the time. And so I got together with Eddie, and one of my memories of that show is that Dennis was Larry's partner, and Larry decided he wanted to pull out at the last minute. And now, because he thought it was going to lose money, and Larry was not the kind of guy who liked to lose money. And I don't know Dennis from Adam, and he came over to me and said, whatever you do, man, you got to tell Larry that we had 800 people there, we made $3,000. I said, it's your partner, you lied to him. I don't even know the guy. I said, I don't need to, I'm not going to lie for you. And that was my first meeting of Dennis Carluzzo.
What were your early impressions of Eddie Gilbert?
When I first met Eddie, I thought he was great. He was outgoing, he was funny, he was congenial. He helped me put together the first TVs, which kind of took us to the next level. He knew how to, as I said, format a show where to insert the commercials, the matches, and so on and so forth. And at the beginning, I thought, this guy, he was great. I mean, we'd go out, we'd party together, we'd hang out. We shot videos around the streets of Philadelphia on South Street.
Right.
With him and Paulie walking over and just being bizarre. We went to a nightclub where Eddie wore the king's crown and the cape, Kathmandu, and we walked through the club as people just looked at us like we were insane. And Eddie, as I said, was terrific. One thing that Eddie had, it was kind of bizarre though, is Eddie didn't trust anybody. I guess from being in the business, he just didn't trust anybody. He was a very paranoid individual, and he would sit there and pick up a newsletter, the Torch, the Observer, whatever it may be, and he'd read it, and he'd sit there and say, and Eddie Gilbert went to Memphis to work a show, and he'd say, you know what he's really saying? He's not really saying Eddie Gilbert went to work a show. He's really saying is Eddie Gilbert couldn't get work somewhere else. And then I said, whoa. I realized then he had a major paranoia going, that it was like the world against him kind of thing. And he brought his brother Doug in, and Lawler's son, Kevin Christopher, who was his gopher and his houseboy kind of thing. And that was my first real getting together with Eddie. Eddie was a hothead, a great guy, a fun guy to be with, great guy to party with, but he was a hothead who couldn't control his temper, and his paranoia kind of ate him up, and some of his demons ate him up, as evidenced by unfortunately what happened to him.
Was there anyone else up for Eddie's job at the time, besides Eddie? Before Paul?
Paul hadn't even come on the scene yet. I hadn't even met Paul yet. At the first, I had thought about Terry Funk. But I knew Terry, when I talked to Terry, he was not willing to make a commitment to be up here as much time as it would take to do that. In fact, he kept trying to talk me out of doing it, period, telling me I was crazy to go into the business, and you're a nice guy, don't do it, you're nuts. And so, no, at that time, there was no one who was, other than Eddie, who I was going to work with at that point.
What was the immediate and long-range goals of ECW when you first started?
Well, when I first started, it was just to run local shows. I didn't even think about how we were going to promote them. I thought a couple hundred people in a building was great, and give all the local guys, work, and we all had fun with it. We were kind of like a family. which is a theme that you'll see that'll go through our whole ECW tenure. And never had a long-term goal until we moved forward. Once we started on television, then all the goals started becoming more long-term and more real and more like, oh my God, this thing could really snowball from here.
How did TV come about?
Matt Radico was our first cameraman.
Right.
And he called me up one day and said there was a guy named Sam Schroeder who runs, right now he's one of the heads of Comcast, but then he was the head of Sports Channel Philadelphia. And he said this guy said he'd consider putting a show on because they were looking for any kind of programming at that time that wasn't the Phillies, the Sixers, or the Flyers. So we made a pilot episode. This is still pre-Eddie, pre-Paul. Excuse me. We made a pilot episode and we did it at a boys club. And I believe Sandman was the champ at the time. He had beaten Morocco for the belt in one of the worst finishes possibly in the history of mankind, where his wife Peaches was supposed to throw powder and missed Morocco by maybe 10, 15 feet. And then when Morocco realized what happened, he went, grabbed his eyes and fell to the ground. And it was just it was an abomination. But that's how Sam became champ. And that was our very first TV taping. And we submitted the pilot. He liked the pilot. And that's when we decided to do the show. And that's when I needed help because I couldn't be full-time doing both of what I was doing here and there. And that's when I brought Eddie into Philadelphia to live.
Now, at the time, was it hard dealing with the older veterans who were lazy or didn't have it anymore?
Well, to tell you the truth, I was pretty selective about who we brought in, who we didn't bring in. I mean, we really went after the kind of the guys that we liked as kids. I mean, we wanted to use the Abbeys and the Sheiks and the Kevin Sullivans. We were looking for that hardcore audience. So we weren't bringing in, I mean, did I bring in a Jim Neidhart and then say, oh, what a waste of money that was? Yes. But most of the time, like, the nicest person of all of them was Ivan Koloff, Uncle Ivan. I mean, he came in the first night and he said, why don't you let me put one of your guys over, help start elevating them? As the first person who was a veteran who ever said that to me. In turn, years later, you'll see as we talk about it, like Funks and people like that elevated everyone in the business. Yeah. But back then, Ivan was the first one. In fact, he put over Tony Stetson in a match. Tony the Hitman Stetson, who was the Broad Street Bully before there was a Jersey Devil over here. But anyway, yeah, so Ivan was great, and no, I didn't find any of them lazy because they were coming in for one match or one night or two nights of TV tapings. And then Eddie brought in people that he knew would work and would cooperate with him. He brought in Paul Heyman, Paulie Dangerously, whatever you want to call him. And Paul used to run the interviews for Eddie, and he was just an announcer, along with Jay Six-Pack Sully. Back in our days when, we really were struggling to put together any kind of a semblance of a talent and of a TV show.
What are your memories of Chris Candido when he first entered ECW?
Believe it or not, I remember Tammy more than I remember Chris at first because, well, my memories of Chris are when I first met him, he's a different person than he was today, obviously. He also wasn't plagued by some of the demons that have plagued him throughout his career. And he was a smaller guy, but he looked great with Hot Body. And that's when we came up with the idea of the Suicide Blondes. I mean, we made Hot Body dye his hair blonde. Oh no, I beg your pardon, Hot Body was still a dark hair. That's what was the funny part of the gimmick. We called them the Suicide Blondes, but only one of them had blonde hair. And so Chris was a hard worker, great hand, knew his way around. And Tammy worked one show for us where she came out and sprayed something in someone's eyes at the end of a match, and the next week started for Jim Cornette with Smoky Mountain. So she worked one show for us before she went on, and then Chris stayed.
Did Kevin Sullivan have any booking role when he came in?
No, but he certainly made a play for it. Once Paul got the book, he jumped ahead a little bit, and I started to use Kevin. Actually, let me tell you how I got to Kevin. We had our second major event planned. First at the ECW Arena, which was the bingo hall that everybody calls, but became, to this day, one of the most famous buildings in the history of professional wrestling, which when you look at the place is amazing, but it's true. It's considered a famous wrestling building. And the first major house show we did where we had actually a real audience, the main event was Eddie against Terry Funk.
Summer Sizzler?
Yeah, Summer Sizzler. And that was the show, I believe, where Angel got her top ripped off. First time, I'll never forget sitting in a room with Eddie when we were doing a bra and panties match, or first one to get strip match, something like that. And I said, we were always fans. I was always a fan. I said, I always hated, they're such rip-offs. As soon as somebody gets down to their bra, they're going to throw a towel over. And he said, well, let's just strip her. And I said, huh? I said, you can't do that. He goes, why not? And so I went to, it was Peaches against Tigress. And they both worked at the time as dancers. So I didn't think there'd be any problem. And they both said no. They said, no, my kids will be there, or there'll be lots of kids there. I'm not comfortable doing that in front of children. At that same time, Angel Amoroso was looking for work. And she was saying to me, I'll do anything, beat me, pin me, strip me, I don't care.
Right.
So she came out and we did literally pull her top off, and that's on that Super Summer Sizzler Spectacular tape of '93. And the audience's reaction was like, oh my God, they couldn't, this was not 30 people now, this was like hundreds of people. They were flabbergasted. And it was one of those things, the first of when we started with our new pledge, if we were going to promise something, whether it be somebody to be unmasked, a loser leaves town, whatever it was going to be, we were going to deliver on it.
Right.
Nobody else ever delivered on that stuff. Somebody do a loser leaves town match, and then Dusty Rhodes is coming back with a mask on, or this one's coming back with a mask on. We swore we would never do that. We would never rip off the people. So when we promised them someone was going to get stripped, someone got stripped. And that was our first major house show. So the next major one, which was coming in June, I believe, or September, I guess would have been, the main event was supposed to be Abby
And Eddie.
against
Hanson and Funk.
Hanson and Funk. And for that, another thing, Stan Hansen had not worked for anybody in the United States at that point for like 5 or 6 years. No
Right.
one had seen him. And I called him up and I said, hey, I'm running this thing here. This is what I'm doing. And he was great to work with. He was a pleasure. And he came in, and the week before this all happened, Eddie and I had a big blow up. Eddie was paranoid that I was talking to Gary Juster of the NWA, and he thought that I was aligning myself with Jim Crockett and Paul, and everybody was out to get Eddie. And I said, Eddie, you're so far off base. You're just not even close to reality. Paul's getting ready to go off with Crockett. They're going to do their own thing. I said, it's got nothing to do with us. But he freaked out. He had lost his temper. He quit. I said, okay.
I was going to ask you, how hard was Eddie and Doug to work with?
They were very hard to work with. But let me just tell you what happened. So he quit, and then the next day he called me up and he said, can I talk to you? And this, I said, well, I hate to tell you this because he never got along with Kevin. I said, but I called Kevin Sullivan last night and replaced you in the match. He was dumbfounded. He was floored. He said, you replaced me with Kevin Sullivan? But then he didn't want to lose it again because he realized he just threw away his meal ticket, his weekly paycheck. So then he said, well, listen, we've been through a lot together. Can you do me a favor? I'm going to be running some angles with Terry Funk down in Texas. Can I just come back for that one show and do a run-in at the end with Funk so I won't even come in the dressing room, I won't bother anybody? I said, okay, deal. He came in, and then he took the mic, which was something he was not supposed to do. And that set Paulie off because Paul was now running his first show. This is the first show that Paul was ever in charge of the locker room. And he was really upset that he did that. Then Doug Gilbert, his brother, kind of flipped out in the back with a baseball bat and started smashing glasses and stuff. Of course, not threatening anybody of the boys, but just losing his temper. So that was the end of the whole Gilbert regime here in Philadelphia, basically.
What are your memories of getting strangled by Stan Hansen?
Well, unfortunately, Stan Hansen's as blind as a bat. I can't believe you have that good a memory. And I'm in the back with him and telling him, they're going to bring him out and we're going to get him over, et cetera, and how we're going to do it. And for some reason, he got out there and thought I was the ring announcer, as opposed to the owner of the company, because at that time, I'd never been touched. So he came in the ring to do an interview, and I'm standing there holding this microphone. Next thing I know, he throws his lasso around my neck, and he starts to strangle me. And meanwhile, I'm trying to hold the microphone up because I'm interviewing him, and I'm holding the microphone up as I'm choking and selling, and my face is getting red. I thought to myself, Stan, it's Todd. This is not the ring announcer. He's like, well, he had no idea who he was choking out at the time. No clue, because he was blind as a bat. But he was nice, easy to work with, very easy.
Why was the decision made to give Paulie Eddie's position?
Well, it was a temporary thing at first because Paul and I, for whatever reason, we had similar backgrounds. We had a lot of the same sense of humor. Very identical sense of humor. We just clicked, and so we started talking all the time on the phone, on a nightly basis. And that's what got Eddie freaked out. He thought Paul was out to get him, which again couldn't have been further from the truth. So, what'd you ask me?
No, I was asking you how did the decision come about to get Paulie Eddie's?
So Paul said to me, you want me to help you with the show? Because that night Crockett was going to be in town anyway.
Right.
He said, I'm meeting Crockett in Philadelphia anyway. He's coming, he wants to see your show and just see the hands and so on and so forth. He said, I'll help you out with the show. He was not going to be, the booker per se. He did a great job. Fast forwarding to when Crockett's thing fell apart, at that point he had been working every week to put together the TV show for him because now Eddie wasn't there. And like I said, we just clicked. We had a chemistry between us where we would sit down and talk through an angle, and it would get funnier and funnier, or it would get more and more hardcore. And everything we did together, it just worked. We just seemed to click. And that's when I said to him, how about doing this as a full-time position? And he willingly accepted. readily accepted.
Looking back on it today, do you regret ever hiring Paulie as your booker?
Boy, that's a tough question. Do I regret it? No, I can't say I regret it because I don't know that we could have ever gotten as far as we had gotten without him. But I don't know that I would, in retrospect, have done it the same way. I don't know if I would have brought anybody in and given them the kind of control that I gave Paul at that time.
Right.
I'm not sure that was something I would ever want to do again. I think I knew enough to have, if I were doing this 24/7 as opposed to doing this and running another business, that I could have done that part by myself. Because I did book the whole federation for the first, 18 months or 2 years by myself. And then I did it with Eddie and then with Paul. And then eventually Paul just did it by himself.
Was your family supportive of you putting all the money into ECW?
Well, at the beginning, there wasn't a lot of money being put into it. At the beginning, it was a very small,
Right.
small scale thing.
I think I read on that interview that you said $10,000.
Yeah, and that was just to get a bond and a wrestling license.
Right.
When the money started to come in is when we started to all of a sudden want to go on other networks. When we decided to go on in Florida on the Sunshine Channel, in New York on MSG, that's when the money really started to fly, because then it's $3,000 a week for this network, $3,000 a week for that network. That's when the money really started to go out. If not for the internet, and we were the first people to ever use the internet, to be quite honest with you, because no one had, it wasn't even really a thing at the time, hardly. When Bob Ryder came to me and said, "Will you do a chat for Prodigy?"
Right, it was Prodigy.
And I said, "What's that mean?" And he said, "I'm going to type something, and this guy named Todd Misnick's going to be in Philadelphia. He'll give you the questions, you answer." So we did that. And the people on the internet started talking about these shows. And they started asking for tapes of them. Well, that's how we funded the company almost for the first year we were on television, is the sale of those tapes. People from all over the place, even Japan, were buying these tapes, the same price of the cost of a ticket. So even though we maybe only had 200 or 300 people in the audience, to me it was like having 600 people paid because they're all getting the tapes. And the tapes literally is what funded that company. So it wasn't as big an outlay. I mean, there were so many rumors about how much money was lost to this. I walked out of there, everything I walked in there with. I don't know how many people can say that, but thank God I did.
Right.
I was happy with my exit strategy. It worked the way I wanted to. I did what I wanted to accomplish. I feel that no one else in the history of the business has ever taken a company and made the big two into a big three. And this little guy from a jewelry store who started running little bar shows in a matter of 3 years or 4 years became the two into a big three. To me, that was a great accomplishment. Having accomplished that, now I'm at a point where now it's been 3 years where I'm on the road and I'm working this job, day and night, in addition to my other job. And my kids weren't seeing me. And I have kids and I love my kids, and they weren't getting any daddy time at all. And so in '97, that's when I decided that I had to make a decision. Paul already owned the company at that point, and that's why I left.
What were your initial plans for Terry Funk?
Well, initially Terry said he was only going to come and do color commentary. And that lasted all about 5 minutes until he got caught up into it. Next thing you know, and first night I met Terry Funk, he was doing the announcing. We did 3 shows at a time at Cabrini College. It's our first taping for ECW for the sports channel, and he shot an angle with Eddie where Eddie hit him in the back, with a chair. Mm-hmm. We go back through the curtain. You guys understand, these are all young boys. They're all green as they can be, save Eddie, Snuka, and maybe Paul. And that was it. And here's Terry, and I was there. I knew that he didn't lay it in. It wasn't a hard shot. But he walked back behind that curtain, and there was nobody there but the boys. And he sold his back and walked around, like he was dying. And I thought, wow, there's a guy who really takes pride in his profession. He wasn't letting the boys know, that he wasn't hurt. And I knew he wasn't hurt. He knew, but God bless him. He took so much pride in his profession that he sat there in that backstage holding his back, and because it was a little show, but still he wanted to teach these guys right from wrong. And boy, he was a great teacher, and he's a great guy. I just talked to Terry. Today's Tuesday. I guess I would say last Friday or Monday he was trying to put something together. Everybody's trying to put something together now because there's so many opportunities for everyone. But I speak to Terry every 2 months or so, probably 5-6 times a year.
What was your early memories of JT Smith and the Sandman?
JT Smith and the Sandman. The first show I ran, we were supposed to do an angle where they were going to paint JT white and paint DC Drake black. They were working as Hot Body and Larry Winters. And that was the first time ever that I got worked by one of the boys, because they didn't want to do it both ways. They wanted to just do JT. So conveniently, they left the black paint or shoe polish, whatever, down in the locker room. I was livid over that because then it became a racist angle. It wasn't a racist angle when they were doing both of them. It was like just to like say that they shouldn't be together, this team, and they were like making one into the other. So they totally killed the angle of what I was trying to accomplish. I was furious with Winners after that. It was his first show booking. It was the first show we did at the sports bar. I took the book away from that night, and from then on, I booked everything.
Do you think, well, actually, did people think JT got any advantages because you worked in the pawn shop?
No, because he didn't work here until he'd already been in the business working for ECW for, at least a year and a half.
Right.
And he really he was never world champion. So he never got anything anybody else got. And he worked hard. He was quiet. He was a good guy. He cared about the fans. He was the first one. If I said, hey, there's a sick kid from Variety Club, which is a handicapped children's charity, I said, I would really love to meet a wrestler. He'd do it. He was one of the first to volunteer when we go up to the Variety Club camp every year and do a free show for the kids. JT is a class act. I still talk to him. He now has 2 children. He's living in Virginia. If we ever do what has been rumored to do, a quote-unquote tribute to ECW's tour, that's something that's been discussed recently, where they want to go from town to town, wherever ECW ran, and call it a tribute to ECW tour. All the originators, JT would be part of that group if we go with that.
It's a great idea. What was the first big show you promoted where you realized you had something?
I guess the night I realized we really realized we had something. I couldn't think of what the name of the show was, but it was the first time the crowd chanted ECW. I'd never been in a show, and either anybody else, where instead of chanting for a particular individual, they were chanting for the product. And to me, that's like a landmark in this business. It had never been done before. To the point where WCW, when they were taping down in Florida, their Disney tapings, had a mascot going through the audience in between matches going, WCW, trying to get this chant started. Never took on. Never took off. They would chant for Hogan or they would chant for Savage, but they wouldn't chant for the product. Here they were saying, we don't care who's out there. We know we're going to get delivered hard work. We know we're going to see a good show. I mean, we were such trendsetters in so many ways back then. For the first time ever in the business, everyone out to the ring and said, so-and-so won't be here tonight. We're offering refunds if you're not satisfied. Never been done before by WWF, never done before by any indie promoter, never. To this day now, they all do it.
Right.
But they never did it before. We even got to a point where we said, watch the first half of the show. If you're still not happy, then get a refund. I mean, we were so fan friendly. We wanted to show these people, wait, we're here to give you the biggest bang for your buck. And we got such feedback from the fans. I'll tell you one, the night when I realized there was something special. We did a show. We go back to the old, it's now the Hilton. It was the old Marriott.
The night the line was crossed?
It may have been, I don't think it was that night, but we went back there after the show to the bar because we were staying there. It's one of the hotels we hadn't gotten kicked out of yet. And we got kicked out of every hotel in South Philadelphia, amongst others. And we walked through the lobby doors, Paul and I together, and there were like 200 fans in the lobby of the Marriott, and they all started to applaud. And we both went, whoa. I mean, we were literally dumb. We were taken aback. We were dumbfounded. That's when I knew that people were that's what I'm looking for. They cared so much about what we were doing. I said, my God, this is not a normal thing. I mean, they're not just here just to see the boys. They're actually here to say thank you. Thank you so much for not feeding us that pablum and that cartoon crap. That's all we can get today anywhere else. So we took that cartoons and we threw them out, and then we broke every barrier there was, whether it was cursing on TV, whether it was calling someone by their real name, whether it was shooting on another federation. No one had ever mentioned, WWF had never acknowledged WCW, and WCW never acknowledged WWF. And we went out there and had Shane Douglas shooting promos talking about Hogan sticking a needle in his ass.
Right.
We went out there and did shoot promos on everybody. And we broke every barrier that could be broken, which today now seems so commonplace. No one had ever used a table in the ring before. No one ever done spots like Sabu with a chair off the chair. None of that stuff had been done before. So everybody who saw it here or saw it on videotape was seeing something for the first time. And in this business where everything's sort of recycled, to have anything that's a first-time thing was exciting to these people. And it was exciting not me as a fan. I mean, I was always the biggest fan of my own product. I mean, Sammy likes to say, I'm the biggest mark in the dressing room because I love the product.
Right.
But everybody back there was like that. We were a family. And that initial core group that really started us at the arena, to this day, I don't know how to explain the bond, but there's a bond amongst the 12 to 15 mainstays that will go on forever. I can't go, literally, I won't go 4 weeks, 5 weeks without hearing from Teddy and Johnny, the Public Enemy, without hearing from Scorpio, without, of course, Sandman and Fonzie, who did come later. But the initial core group, we have a bond that just will never leave. And we all were in it for the same thing. We all wanted to get ahead instead of just one individual getting ahead. Everybody wanted to see everybody else succeed, because if they succeeded, we all succeeded. And everybody's just standing around the monitor, including Terry Funk and including the veterans. And they'd watch each guy's match and they'd say, hey, this was great. Next time, do this, do that. And they were trying to help each other. It was so different than any other locker room. Hawk came to me one day and he said, I've never been in a locker room like this in my life. He said, I've never seen such a caring locker room. He said, you guys are unbelievable. He said, of course, this is also where all the people come and can't get a job anywhere else. So we're all the drug addicts and the rebels and the this and that. But it was true. We were the rebel federation. We were the extremists. We did something that nobody had ever done before. We delivered. We promised something, we gave it to them. And if something we did sucked, I went out there once on TV and said, hey, you know what? I know, it sucked. We promised you a bomb match.
Right.
We promised you an explosion. What happened that night was Pat Tanaka and his partner was Paul Diamond were against the Public Enemy. And one of them was going to get locked into a cage and there was going to be an explosion. We had the gunpowder, we had it all laid out. And don't ask me why, but one of the cops who was doing security decided he was going to help these guys to get up that ladder, stepped on the bowl of gunpowder, shot it all over the stage so that when the time came for the bomb to go off, and here I'm at ringside not knowing any of this, and I'm going, 10, 9, and I'm pumped up waiting for this big explosion. 3, 2, I hit 1, and you hear, psst, and there's like no smoke, and I was like, oh boy. I was like, oh my God. Now all of a sudden the whole crowd turned on me, and I'm like, what's going on? I ran to the back, I couldn't get out of ringside fast enough. And we came out and said, hey, we promised you a bomb. It didn't happen. We're sorry. We screwed up. We tried. It wasn't for lack of trying, but we screwed up. We know we screwed up. All we can do is promise you a better show next time. And one of our other staples was that we were the only people who didn't use names of quote-unquote A-name wrestlers when they were going to make an appearance just to draw people. We got more of a kick out of watching the reaction when a Bobby Eaton or an Arn Anderson came in there without anybody knowing they were going to be there, or Rick Rude or whoever it may have been.
Right.
Instead of saying, guess what, Rick Rude's going to be there. That may have drawn us an extra 100 people. But the idea of these people going home saying, you never know what the hell is going to happen to these shows. It's so unpredictable. Anybody from anywhere could show up anytime. And that's what made the arena so special, because you knew something was going to happen. You didn't know when, you didn't know what, but you knew we were going to try to give you something. And as I said, we would spend money to bring people in and not advertise them, knowing that we could have drawn more. But in the long run, it helped us because people just were so enthused with the product. They just loved what we were doing.
How did you get involved with Victor Quinones and some of the wing talent at the time?
Gee, that's a good question. Victor called me up asking me if we would consider doing some talent exchanges. He offered me the Headhunters. That's how it started. He said, I'll bring in the Headhunters. And I said, well, no cost to use. Let me just show you how my guys can work. Maybe you'll give Miguel Perez some work. Maybe you'll give some of my guys some work. So he brought in a tag team match. It was the Headhunters against Hugh Morris. Back then he was Crash the Terminator and Miguel Perez. Either one of the Headhunters or Hugh, one of them got thrown through a wall which was in the arena there, which was made of just plasterboard. Sitting behind the wall at the time in his underwear with a big cigar is Abby, Abdullah the Butcher, who looks out and sees the whole audience, because they see Abby as this crazy maniac, and here he is in this red underwear with a cigar, and he just kind of goes and walked away really quickly. And that was a great memory from the early days, because I mean, we were, oh my God, the repairs in that building. Thank God for the ECW arena and the owners. They were so cool. They said, you can bust this place to smithereens as long as you fix it.
Right.
But we must have put a new plasterboard there after every show. Somebody's head went through a window, through a door. Something, I mean, the chairs got destroyed. I mean, always something was getting broken. It cost us more to repair what we did than to actually put on the show itself. But the arena was, there's no place like it.
How did you get Bob Eaton and Arn Anderson in when they were still under contract for WCW for One World Collide?
Actually, they were under contract, but they were allowed to take other dates. They were working for Smoky Mountain at the time.
Right.
And they really weren't sure if they were going to bring them back in at all. And Paul had a relationship with them from when he worked with the Midnight Express angles. And so he had a relationship with Bobby. And he called him up, and they came in. We said, as I said, we didn't announce it. Never told anybody they were going to be there. And I think Eaton pulled the hood off first. Everybody, there was like 4 lumberjacks or something. They were all, jobbers.
Right.
And the last Rebel, this one, and the next thing you know, last was Bobby Eaton. And as he turned around, the place realized who it was. They went nuts. And as high as they got, boom, when Arn came out, it took it a whole nother level up. I mean, talk about raising the roof. It took the roof off that building that night. That night was one of the defining moments for this organization. There's no question about it. And Arn was great. He took me aside afterwards. I remember that night and saying to me, you got to make sure that you're not doing blood and chairs 7 matches in a row. You got to build up to it. He goes, because you're desensitizing the audience. He was a really nice guy, and he really had a lot of things to offer, and I appreciated his advice that night.
What are your early memories of Shane Douglas?
Shane Douglas. So Eddie brought Shane in first. Eddie was a big admirer of Shane's. And Shane, my first memory of him was being, as a fan, sitting at the Civic Center for Halloween Havoc.
No.
And it was Shane and Johnny Ace against the Freebirds.
Right.
And Philadelphia is a heel town, no matter, plain and simple. And every time it's similar to when like Derek Coleman came back to play for the Sixers. Every time one of the dynamic dudes got offense in, the building would boo. Every time the Freebirds, who were the heels, did anything on offense, the place would pop. So now people picked up what was going on, and the whole building started doing it. And Shane and Johnny Ace were looking like, what the hell? That's unbelievable. This town is like, my God. So Shane came in, and right away he said, the only way you're going to get over here is as a heel. You'll never get over as a babyface, because they hate pretty boys. It's just Philadelphia. It's their nature. So we decided to make Shane heel, and he came out, and I was all happy to say, hey, Shane, welcome, and we turned him heel right away. He joined that group, and no one knew it, but it turned out the guy had an incredible ability behind a microphone. No one ever gave him a chance to do anything except go, yay, dynamic dudes, Right. And once he was allowed to kind of go, and we said, you want to go with it, just go with it, and he took that microphone, and he was amazing. It was like, how could no one have ever tried this guy as a heel before? He had a tremendous presence. He could just get out there and just go. And one time, he did like a 20, 25-minute interview, and we aired the whole thing on television. I mean, that was also something that had never been done before. But it was a riveting interview. You couldn't take your eyes off it. What's Shane going to say next? Because he buried everybody from Ric Flair. Ric Flair was a god here. And here's our champion coming out there and burying him. And he buried Flair because he hated Flair.
Right.
I mean, it was legit heat. That's what I'm saying. We shot with everybody. If there was legit heat there, we didn't disavow, we went with it.
Early impressions of Tommy Dreamer.
When I first met Tommy Dreamer, he was so appreciative just to have a job. He was a really nice guy, soft-spoken. I remember we did, Tommy's very straight, and most of our locker room, unfortunately, was not. Most of our locker room was a partying locker room. I'm not going to lie to you. It was a raucous partying locker room. We did 2 shows in one day, one in Valley Forge Music Fair and that nighttime show in Delaware. So I got a bus that took all the boys so we wouldn't lose anybody along the way, as tends to happen from time to time. And on that bus ride back, at the end of the night, a lot of the guys were smoking pot on the bus, and it was just such a smoke-filled bus. And Tommy was, like I said, a totally straight, totally nice guy. Got off the bus, and I know where he started dancing in the lobby, and everyone's going, what's the matter with Tommy? We realized Tommy got a contact high from being on the bus and didn't realize it. And that was my earliest memory of Tommy. But he used to always say to me, all the time, Todd, I will die for this company. If it means getting killed, I will do that to see this company succeed. And I said, I don't want you to die. But next thing you know, the guy's going through 1 table, 2 tables, 3 tables. He was taking bumps that were unbelievable. He'd go to the ring so injured. I don't know how he is today, but the fact that his body's in one piece at all is amazing, because he really took some hellacious beatings and bumps. And we couldn't get him over until we ran the angle with him and Sandman and the Caning.
Right.
And when everybody said, wow, this guy's pretty damn tough, because his back was bleeding in like 7 spots. I mean, the hell came out of him. Sandman killed him that night. And that finally started to get the respect of the fans. And that was my first impressions of Tommy, as I said, and the relationship just kind of grew from there.
How about Taz and Sabu?
Well, Taz always kept himself. Taz was appreciative of the work. He was very, very quiet in the locker room because he's sort of a low man on the totem pole. I mean, we had him dressed up in a fur as the Tasmaniac, and he used to tag with Kevin Sullivan. He was appreciative for that opportunity. And during their promos, anything Kevin would say, he would go, eep, eep, and make little noises like the little monkey boy or whatever it was. Again, even us not having a clue that if we could put a microphone in this guy's hand, how talented he could be. Paul didn't know, I didn't know. We never thought to let Taz talk on a microphone. So my first impression of him was that he was very respectful. He was old school. He was, he knew the protocol. He knew when you came in the locker room, first thing you do, no matter who you are, you go around and shake everybody's hand in the locker room. That's protocol. He wanted to be like that. He had a desire to be old school. And who'd you ask me beside with Taz?
Sabu.
Oh, Sabu. Sabu was an interesting person. He, at the time, was working for Dennis Carluzzo, and Dennis was only running, once every 3 or 4 months,
right.
and it wasn't paying very much, and we brought him in. We brought him out and used the Hannibal Lecter gimmick with him, where we brought him out on a gurney with 911 pushing him, and the face guard, and for the first time since I had been running, I saw something that I hadn't seen since the days when I was a kid of George Animal Steel. Instead of people reaching out in the aisleway to slap the guys like they always do, people were pulling back as he came down the aisle. And I said, holy shit, they're scared of this guy. I mean, he's 5'7". They were scared of him. And because we're in such a big building, the ECW arena, which is only a third filled, we allowed him to go out there and take chairs and start flinging them across the arena. And people thought he was crazy. To this day, year 2001, true story, I know at least 4 people have told me in the last 6 months they've been afraid to call him up for either an interview, afraid to call him up to book him. They call Bill Alfonso and say, will you call Sabu for us? People are scared to death of this guy. And he may be one of the funniest people you'll ever meet in your life. Sabu's got a hilarious sense of humor. He is funnier than hell. I love Sabu. I talk to Sabu all the time. I feel very bad about the way his career ended up because of what happened between he and Paul, because that was one major point. And Paul, I'll tell you right now, I talk to him all the time, always have, never lost contact. I speak to his family, he speaks to my family. But we really disagreed on certain things. And one of the major disagreements we ever had was after I'd already left, was his keeping Sabu from working, because he felt Sabu wrong. We took things personally with some of the guys, and it goes all the way back to Teddy and Johnny when they first left for WCW. I was thrilled for them. I mean, we were paying them $200-300 a night. Now they had a chance to make $100,000 a year. They had bled, sweat, died for me. How could I not be happy for them? Paul felt it as a personal affront to him. I saw it as not that way at all, and that's why to this day we're still friends. And to this day I'm still friends with Sabu. I felt Sabu had given so much to this company. I mean, he broke his neck in the ring, for God's sakes. I just couldn't see doing something to hurt him trying to better himself. And if by leaving ECW meant bettering himself, then he was entitled to do that for what he'd done for us. And that was in fact, we sat in this office one day, myself, Terry Funk, and Paul. It's less than a year ago, because we were here for a trial over that fire incident, believe it or not. And we both said, you got to let this guy go. I mean, let it go already. I mean, this guy can't get work, he can't do anything, and you're killing him. And he didn't deserve it. But so yeah, Sabu's a great guy. You never know how funny he really is, and people to this day are scared to death of him. Like his uncle. When his uncle, the Sheik, came out, the original Sheik, nobody reached over and patted him on the shoulder when he walked by. First time I met his uncle, I was ring announcing a Joel Goodhart show. Right. And I was, not only a mark, but I was just not used to being around the business at all. And I said to him, so on your way, where are you from, Detroit? He turned around and he looked at me and he started, I didn't know he was working or shooting. He goes, Detroit? And he had the train. He started coming towards me. I said, holy shit, this guy's serious. I mean, he was still scaring me. I was the ring announcer and he was just working me. But I didn't know it at the time. So to find people like that, that's rare. Sabu had that rare ability to literally have people scared of him. And he fought us on that gurney and Hannibal Lecter thing, hand, tooth, and nail, because someone in Japan did it. And Sabu was old school also, so he felt it was disrespectful to do a gimmick someone in Japan was doing, even though he was doing it in front of only 200 people here in Philadelphia. We convinced him to finally do it. He went with it, and it got him over like crazy.
Was it hard to let some of the guys go that were there from the start to favor Paul's new talent?
Well, I don't know. Who was let go? Give me an example.
Like maybe Winters and Hot Body.
Larry Winters was let go from early on because Larry was already old and was not really willing to put forth the effort. Larry did not want to take a chair shot. At the time, we were trying to promote hardcore wrestling. Rebel was there, and we used him for a while. In fact, we kept using him after he broke Sal Blomo's face. I mean, he was not careful in the ring, and he did Blomo was on the ground. He went to hit the mat with a chair, and he smashed his whole face in. We still used Rebel, but Rebel unfortunately had some attitude problems back then. He would walk around the locker room saying, how come I'm the only original guy from the old Eastern guys in TWA who never had a belt? It's not fair, it's not fair. And one of the great ribs of all time that we did actually was in
Wildwood.
You guys know all the stories, right? I can't tell you any stories, so at least the people watching don't know. They don't know it. We did a battle royal in Wildwood, and the winner of the battle royal got to face Snuka that night for the title. So as a rib, Paul told Rebel that he was going over in the battle royal, and told everybody else that Rebel was the first one going out. So Rebel went over to his girlfriend. He said, I'm going to win the battle royal. I'm getting the title shot. Right there and there, it tells you why we never let we put a belt on a guy who has to go out and tell a finish to somebody before the match even starts. So of course the battle royal begins and everybody attacks Rebel, and they're all trying to throw him over. He's going, "No, I'm going over. I'm supposed to win. I'm going over." And the boys were laughing hysterically because I mean, he was so pissed off. But sometimes you need to have somebody smack you across the face and say, "Hey, get your attitude in check," because the attitudes aren't going to work here.
Right.
I mean, Curtis Hughes. Oh my God, the Curtis Hughes story. We were in. Oh my gosh, the name of the building it was towards Delaware. It was a nice nightclub.
I know where. The nightclub. Kahuna?
Not Kahuna, no. It was the one with Fumi. Pulsations.
Yeah.
We asked, Curtis said, "Okay, you're working Taz tonight. You're going to put him over." And he turned out and he said, "I can't put Taz over." And we said, "Why?" He said, "I beat Lex Luger." And then we all laughed. I said, "No, seriously, so here's what you're doing." He goes, "No, I'm serious. I can't do a job. Now, this is not a televised match.
Right.
This is 150, 200 people sitting in the audience." I said, "What?" I said, "You didn't beat Lex Luger. Mr. McMahon put you over on Lex Luger. What are you, crazy?" He said, "Well, I can't do a job after I beat Lex Luger." And he did the job, but he still kicked out on 2.
I remember.
And that was Curtis's last night. One of his last nights. I think he worked 1 or 2 shows after that. And then he went out to work a match in the Lulu Temple against Too Cold Scorpio. One of the legitimate toughest guys you'll ever want to meet. You don't want to mess with Scorp. He's put a hurting on some people in his life, including once in Japan, where he knocked Hawk out cold. Scorp's a tough guy. Quiet, doesn't bother anybody. One of my dearest friends in the world, but he's a tough guy. And he was working a match with Curtis, and Curtis left the ring. He said he got stiffed in the nose or potato, and he went into the back, and Scorpio stood out there not knowing what to do. And he said, "Curtis, come back out here. I'm going to come back there and kill you." And on their mic, and Curtis came back out. Curtis was Curtis. I mean, Curtis used to go to the diner across the street from where we stayed and wait until everybody was finished eating. And was to go over the waiter's plates and they'd take the food off the empty plates. He just had his own way of doing things, but that was Curtis.
Early impressions of Joey Styles.
I met Joey Styles. I walked into my locker room one night, and here's this kind of nerdy, skinny little guy in his underwear in my locker room who I'd never seen before. And I said, "Excuse me," I said, "not to be ignorant or anything, but is there any reason why I don't know you and you're in your underwear in my locker room?" He said, Paul Heyman called me and he told me I could have a tryout tonight. I'm an announcer." I never met the guy before. So it just was an odd thing to meet someone standing there who you'd never seen before. Looked like a fan who had wandered in off the street sitting there in his underwear. Right away we knew Joey had talent. Joey always wanted to be a heel announcer though. He wanted to be a heel so bad, but he sort of had the opportunity to do that in that his first tryout actually he was doing color commentary as a heel.
Yeah.
But after that, he was able to be a heel on the other federations while still being a babyface to the ECW fans. And of course, he originated the Oh My God. He was so integral to the product that during the short period where we had a falling out where he left because he didn't want to make the travel to Philadelphia every week to do the TV show, our show was horrendous without him. And put in somebody who was supposed to be a spoof of Bill Watts.
Right.
Called him
Willie
Scoop Watts, Willie Watts, because Bill Watts hated black people. And so we, of course, got a black announcer and called him Scoop Watts. And it was painstaking. Paul literally wrote that show out sentence by sentence and would stop the tape, give him the next sentence, stop the tape. It was painstaking. Joey's just a very valuable asset. He added so much to the product. And he had an entrepreneurial part. He was like you, Rob. He wanted to get ahead. He had a good job. He started websites. He's a guy who, like yourself, started with nothing and built himself up into a tremendous businessman. And I respect him and you for both that. Thank you for that.
How frustrating was it to have shows canceled by Dennis Carluzzo?
Well, that only happened a couple times, and it was very frustrating. He was so jealous and so obsessed with the fact that when I first got to know Dennis, the deal we had was, and then I didn't have television at the time, I wouldn't run Jersey, he wouldn't run Philly. He could have that territory, I'd start here and see what happened from there. But we got television and we grew. He was obsessed. He was insanely jealous. The Sabus and the Chris Benoits and people that he had used on his occasional shows were now coming to working full time for us. So what he did was he started getting tapes of our shows and sending them to any schools or church centers or Y centers that we're going to be performing at. And we started getting cancellations. And the guy who, one of the most talented people in the whole world, who is the most mild-mannered person in the world, is Mick Foley, Cactus Jack. Never forget him getting out of the car one night as I was driving, calling Dennis up on a pay telephone and said, "You son of a bitch, you mother," he said, "you ever take bread out of my mouth again, I'm going to come to your house." Now, Mick Foley doesn't talk that way to anybody. He's the most humble guy in the world. And one night, security found him and Gino Moore, who was his, like, I don't know, counterpart, bodyguard, whatever, his friend, on their knees, crawling through the parking lot. They were unscrewing the valves on tires. And they brought me out and said, "What do you want me to do with these guys? You want to arrest them?" I said, "Just get them the hell out of here." And I didn't press charges. But they were, even though they denied to this day, they were taking the valves off of people's tires just to let air out of it. Anything to try to hurt us. They called the fire marshal in to say once we grew, and they couldn't stand how much we grew, and they called the fire marshal in to say we were too many people for the capacity of the building. Anything he could do to upset our company, he tried to do. And it's a shame. If he'd have put half that energy into his own company, he might have actually been successful. But he was so obsessed with trying to take us down that he never had a chance to be successful himself.
When did you know about the throwing of the NWA title down?
Well, we decided to do that. The story behind that is pretty simple. Jim Crockett called me up, and now Jim had already, his deal with Paulie had already fallen through. And I was a member of the NWA. Gary Juster, who was the one who got me in there in the first place, was a member. Jim Crockett was a member. I think Cornette was a member. There was a Japanese member. There's about 5 or 6 of us all together. Dennis was a member. I'm sorry, I forgot about him. Easy to forget. Dennis, Crockett calls me up and he said, "Listen, can you do me a favor? I want to get started down here in Texas. I want to start running a promotion. How about you get an NWA champion, because you're the only one who's in the NWA who has television, because then it was called NWA Eastern Championship Wrestling. Right. You're the only one who has television. How about giving us an NWA heavyweight champion to go with your Eastern Championship title, and then I can do tag team champions down here at my first show, and then your guy will just drop the belt, etc., etc." I said, "All right, you know." He asked me to do him a favor. I'd never had any heat with Jim Crockett. I said, "Okay." Next thing I know, well, now he calls me. I think he was like the head of the NWA. He was the president or vice president. I assumed he did this with all their blessing. A week later, I got to pick up a sheet or something where Dennis and somebody else are saying, "No way, we never approved this. We're blocking this. It's not going to happen." Well, I didn't want to do this show. I was asked to do this show. I had no desire to do anything for the NWA. We're just, we like to use the name because it lent some credibility to Eastern, but I didn't ask them to do a tournament, nor did I want to do a tournament. All of a sudden now he was on his high haunches. "I'm not going to let you guys do this, and I'm not doing that. And it's only going to be done my way." And he just went off and did interview after interview, and I was smoking hot because he'd already messed with my business enough times.
Right.
So we said, "Well, we have 2 ways to go. We've already announced this tournament. We've already called Joe Malenko, Dean Malenko. We had already called people to make it seem like an important tournament. We didn't just use our local hands. In other words, we really brought people in. Scorpio's first time in was that night." So I guess about a week beforehand, we decided that's what we were going to do. We were going to change the name because Paul, God bless him, he had his finger on the pulse of what was going on. He was so MTV back then. He said to me, "Todd, 1 year the word extreme is going to be everywhere. There's going to be extreme skiing, extreme sport. Let's get there first. Let's do." He ran through the angle how we're going to do it. We decided what we're going to do, and I called Dennis up. I said, "Okay, he wanted to put the belt on Benoit, I believe." And we said, "No, Shane's our champion. We're not going to do it unless Shane wins the belt, and then he can just drop it to your guy or whatever the case may be." And we were fuming at Dennis. And all he kept saying is, "Oh man, they're not going to believe it, man. Me in the ECW arena, they're going to think we're friends. Me, we're really going to show all those people." And I mean, no one could even stomach this guy. So he came that night, and of course had no clue what was going on. And this was his receipt for calling all those schools, for sending all those tapes, for calling the fire marshal, for taking the valves off of the tires, for going to the sheets and trying to hammer. I mean, he did nothing but mess with us. And now it never struck back. This was his night. It just happened to be a grander scheme and a little bit more intelligent than something he would have come up with on his own. I can remember sitting next to him as we sat at that table, and Shane threw down that belt and started doing a speech, and he started biting his nails, and he said, "Hey man, he just pissed on the belt. He just pissed on the belt." I said, "Dennis, it's an angle. Relax. Don't worry about it." He goes, "No, man, he's pissing on the belt." I said, "It's cool. Don't worry about it." So we went into the back where Dennis, of course, did 2 takes of his promo saying that if Shane Douglas doesn't defend this belt and recognize this belt, then we're going to throw Eastern Championship Wrestling out of the NWA. He left, and after he left, we cut the promo where, of course, we quit the NWA and became Extreme. And Dennis was sitting home Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, and this was a Saturday night when it happened. 3 days later, he was probably the most shocked person of anybody because nobody knew it was coming because we taped it after everybody left the building. And as he sat there watching himself do his promo, I'm sure he was all puffed up. "Yeah, I used to screw with these guys, but now I'm..." And next thing you know, his mouth must have gone. As he realized he just got suckered. And we buried the organization, which was a dead organization anyway. I mean, there was nobody running shows in the NWA, and we were the only ones with television, and we were only in Philadelphia. So how big was the organization was the NWA? But yeah, that was our receipt to Dennis for everything he had done to us.
Was there any fallout with any of the wrestlers because of that angle or not?
No. There's a big rumor that was the reason Terry Funk didn't come that night.
I was going to ask you, what was the altercation of Terry Funk quitting the company before he was supposed to tag with Cactus against Public Enemy?
Okay, he didn't quit the Federation. What happened was Paul was handling transportation at the time. And Paul has so many things on his plate generally, especially back then, or always, that he should not have been handling transportation. Somebody else should have been handling it. And he tried to do something with Terry where he didn't get him his ticket information until like 2 o'clock the night before the show. And Terry got pissed. He just felt he should have been treated with more respect. And he just said, I'm not coming. And just didn't come. And everybody said, oh, it's because the NWA thing. Well, Terry didn't know we were going to do the NWA belt that night. Nobody knew what was going on with the NWA belt. So that was a total fabrication, wherever that story came from. And as I said, to this day, Terry and I are still good friends. But yes, he was angry. He didn't show up. And we were panicked. What the hell are we going to do? I sat in that room with Paul, and he said, hey, Dreamer, and Sammy, I said, and this is one of the few times I'll take credit for a booking idea. I said, I got it. Mikey Whipwreck. Because at the time, Mikey was so over. Mikey Whipwreck originally was going to be called the Ultimate Warrior. Huh. It's a takeoff of that Ultimate Warrior. He's going, oh no, oh dear, oh my, please. And we did this whole thing with the underdog who had never won a match and got the title by mistake. And then every week he'd get killed, but the person who killed him would get disqualified, so he kept holding the belt.
Right.
He'd come on TV and say, please, Mr. Gordon, please take this belt back. My mom's going to kill me. And he did live with his mother, who was furious at him for coming in with black eyes. I mean, it was a shoot. It was hilarious. And so I said, let's put him with Mikey. And I said, because the crowd loves Mikey, and then let's put them over on the Public Enemy. And while Mikey keep running back, he doesn't want to come out.
Right.
And Paul said, turned to me, he said, you know what? He goes, that was great crisis booking. He said, let's do it. And we did it, and thank God it worked. And they didn't shit all over us for not having Funk there. But you get in situations like that, especially when it's your main event. It's like when Sabu didn't show up. I mean, those are situations as a promoter, you just want to crawl in a hole and die when your main event no shows and you have no clue that it's coming. So, Mikey took that spot, and he and Cactus had a nice little title run.
Do you think there was ever ulterior motives for Paul putting him in any angles?
No. You must be thinking something specific. I mean,
no, I'm just wondering if there's any hidden motives you think that Paul would have.
I mean, I'm sure there were people who pissed him off that he buried on purpose. I don't think there was any angles that had an ulterior motive for him to gain anything from them. I mean, surely, our whole goal was have monetary gains and make the company successful. So I don't think he would have done anything, even if he didn't like somebody, just for the sake of, for an attempt to let himself lose money. I don't think that would have been the case.
Right.
No, I don't think he ever did anything with an ulterior motive.
How did you feel when Shane Douglas left for the World Wrestling Federation the first time? Well, the only time.
Well, when he left when he left, he had pretty much had a long run there at the top. And there was nowhere else for him to go in our company. So he really, it was time to start elevating the other people, just like Funkhead and Sabu, and they had elevated Shane, and now there wasn't anywhere else for Shane to go. And Shane had visions of, because he had been so successful as our champion, of being able to go into the WWF and be a superstar. And he went in with the wrong attitude and got off on the wrong foot with everyone, to the point where we knew we could use him back. And I was talking to JJ one day, and I said, I know Shane used to call me up, please, can you get me out of my contract? What can you do? Anything you can do. And I called J.J. Dillon up and I said, is there anything we can do to get Shane back? He says, just ask. I said, what? He goes, we can't wait to get him out of here. I said, well, we want him. So that's fine by us. And we took him back. But the night he left, Shane was involved in some of our greatest angles. I mean, the night he left, when he took off the shirt,
right.
I pretended to beg him to stay. And he came, 911 chokeslammed him. And he had the WWF shirt on. And when he took Gary Wolf with it by the halo, I mean, Shane was involved in some of the best angles we ever did.
We're talking during the break about Jimmy Snuka, and you said you wanted to have some.
There were a couple funny Jimmy Snuka stories. I'll tell you a couple of them. One, he had his own gopher. It seemed like a lot of people had their own gophers. His was the Metal Maniac, who one time walked out of a ring after in a small show with where JT Smith gave him a clothesline, screaming, "You broke my nose! You broke my nose!" and walked out of the match. And we were doing a show at I guess it was the Chestnut Cabaret. Let's tell you the story before I tell you about the Snuka interview, where Snuka and Ivan were sitting in the back, and Snuka's supposed to work Metal Maniac, and he said to Ivan, he says, you got a blade on you. And he's like, I'm juicing? He goes, yeah, you got a blade? And Ivan goes, yeah, but it's old, rusty old one. She goes, that's okay, brother, that's okay. He goes, nothing. And Maniac is sitting there going, oh my God, he's going to cut me with a rusty blade. Oh my God. So they go out there, and we have the tape of this. I mean, the tape does exist. I think it was called the Best of Superfly Snuka from the old Eastern Championship tapes. And during the match, you see Snuka like this. He reaches under where he's got nothing in his mouth at all, and he goes across Maniac's head, and he's going, I'm bleeding, he's going, squeeze harder, and Maniac's going, and of course there's no cut on his head. He's going, squeeze, he's going, argh! His face, it was hilarious. It was just a great rib. But I'll tell you two Snuka stories. One was Eddie Gilbert went with him to a show in Delaware, and somebody said to him, can I do a shoot interview with you? And at the time, no one was doing shoot interviews. So it was like unheard of. So every time they asked Jimmy a question, he would say, as the Superfly leapt off the cage. He just totally did not understand what he meant by a shoot interview. Right. So he just kept talking as the Superfly. We never let Jimmy do interviews because he wasn't really much of an interview. One night, we did an angle where he was passing his boots to Taz, I believe. It was a passing the torch kind of thing. Well, Jimmy just, say whatever comes to your mind. And he went on and did a 35-minute promo, which had everyone running out of the little room because we were laughing so hard because Taz was stuck there. And he's sitting there, he's going, as the lava flows, brother, coming down the mountains. And he just went on. Well, now we started to realize after 5 minutes that this guy was just going to go. And literally, the only people left in the room were the cameraman, Taz, and Snuka. Taz was involved. Another thing like that once where we were in the lobby of the Travelodge. And I think it was Dreamer who found Leon Spinks, former world heavyweight boxing champion, with a hood over his head, sitting at a table, drool coming out of his mouth, all narcotic up. I don't know whether he was shooting up or what he was doing. He was just out of it. So we said, wow, we get a little bit of a push out of this because we're trying to get Taz over as a monster heel at the time. Leon, we're going to use you, we're going to do a promo with you, and then you'll sit in the front row the next night at the show, and we'll do a little thing with you and Taz. So I go up to the interview area. And as everybody was doing interviews, Leon was sitting against the wall, and he was still nodding, and then he'd go, in the middle of someone's promo, hee-haw! And everybody stopped and go, what the hell was that? So somebody's in the middle of a promo. Well, after like the fourth time he would do something that Taz said, you guys are ribbing me, right? You really don't want me to do an angle with this guy. And then he was just completely out of it. So, of course, we showed him in the row, but, of course, we never could do an angle with him because he was just way, 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 way out there.
How much of a blow was it when Public Enemy left the company?
It was I guess the beauty of ECW was, and continued to be all the way through, is that nobody was irreplaceable because the product was bigger than any one individual. And that I give credit to Paul for. He used to always say, I'm never going to let one person be my ultimate warrior. No one's going to be able to ever say to me, pay me more, I'm not going out there tonight. Because the people didn't matter. Parts could be interchangeable.
Right.
He was the genius. They were performing the art. Again, Paul had a real hard time with that because he brought them in. They were his project. He made them into a name. He made people think they're better actual workers than they are, although Teddy is a very good worker. To this day, Teddy and Johnny remain two of my dearest friends. Teddy was involved with my fantasy camp with me. Johnny, I talk to probably about once every week to 10 days. I was happy for them to see them make the money. He took it personally. I thought it was going to be a tremendous blow. I thought because we ended every show the same way with their match, dancing with the audience. And that whole Rocky Horror Picture thing where the audience got involved with the guys, that synergy is something that's never been recreated. But,
what's that?
Oh, Public Enemy. So when they left, we thought that it was going to be a blow. But everything else we had thought was going to be a blow, whether it was the bomb not going off or not ever trying to be a blow. We always managed to keep the same faithful because these people were diehard ECW fans. Not just wrestling fans or not just the Shane Douglas fan or Sebin. They were ECW fans. They wanted to know what we were going to do. They wanted to go out there and yell Shaw at Hack Myers, who I just spoke to for the first time in 10 years, like 3 days ago. They wanted to go out there and yell Balls and Axel, and they wanted to be part of everything that went on. And they were all so smart that really there's only 2 times that we ever actually got the fans who were so smart. And in Philadelphia, I really genuinely believe that audience is the smartest audience anywhere in the country. Whether it's because they read sheets, whether they were insiders. Before the internet became things where you could read all this stuff, and before the business was exposed to the extent it is now, these people were already smart to almost everything. So we got them twice. The one, of course, was my all-time favorite angle, which was the Sandman blinding angle. where Dave Shearer of OneWrestling.com and other people who who are fans who are, a little smarter than say you're just Joe Blow coming off the street, were calling me up almost on a daily basis saying, "Is he okay? Is Hack really going to be okay?" And I had to work him, and even though I didn't want to, I said, "No, he's done. He really lost the vision." And everybody thought that guy was blind because we didn't even tell the boys. So when he came out that night, we shot that angle. It was tremendous. And there was one more that I started to tell you about. I just lost my train of thought when I got off on the Sandman one. We were just talking about. What to come back to? I lost it. There was something that everybody believed was real also, and I can't remember what it was that everybody bid on, even the smarts. And I can't remember what the heck we were talking about that prompted me to think about it. Public Enemy.
I don't know.
I don't remember either.
What is your memories of working with Raven?
Scotty was a great guy. Scotty is hilarious. We used to travel. He's traveled us a little bit. And he could sit there and he'd love trivia. Scotty loved to compete in anything. He wanted me to play me in ping pong or pool.
Right.
Or he would it's any kind of game at all. He'd drive in the car, he'd name a song, he'd have to tell him who sang it. Who's this song? Who's this? Who played Cousin It on the Addams Family? I mean, loved to outro. Those were the car rides with Scotty. We had a group that traveled together for the first couple of years. It was me, Sandman, Nancy Sullivan, Scorpio, and Fonzie. The five of us. We're like inseparable. Then Nancy left, and it was just the four of us. And the four of us were like one. I mean, we were, like I said, the best of friends. And little by little, we added one person as a fifth person throughout the way, which included Rick Rude traveled as our fifth for a while, Brian Lee for a while, and Tommy Rich for a while. So that gives you an idea of the kind of crew we had. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But anyway, people used to always say to me, "I don't understand how you and Sandman can be best friends. I don't get it. I mean, this guy's this big loudmouth, beer swilling, and you're this conservative." I said, "Well, you don't always judge a book by its cover." I said, "He's not as bad as he is. I'm not as good as I am. And somewhere in the middle we meet, and some click between us. And to this day, we're still best friends." But I think Public Enemy was something that scared us about them leaving at first, and we overcame it. Unfortunately, I think they regret ever having left the company.
Right.
Turning out, seeing how their careers ended up.
Do you think the crucifixion angle was in poor taste?
No. I thought that was the only reason that even became an issue at all, and that's a regret I have to this day, is because Kurt Angle was at the show.
I was going to ask you about that.
And Kurt Angle was offended by the angle that we did. And Shane brought him in from Pittsburgh, where he was from. And he was in Shane's ear. Then Shane was in our ear. And then we thought, well, you know what? Both Paul and I are Jewish. We certainly didn't mean this with any disrespect whatsoever. It was Raven's gimmick. Raven's gimmick was to come out and spread the arms, as Dreamer would do, as a crucifix. That was his gimmick. Never once were we out to offend people. We did plenty of things where we tried to offend people, but it was done tongue-in-cheek. This was no offense meant at all. So we were so surprised by the reaction by both Kurt Angle and Shane that we let Scotty go out and break character and apologize. And I'm sorry to this day that we did that, because we never should have done it. We should have just kept going on with the show. But I think when you're raised a certain way, and maybe it's because we were raised Jewish, you feel something about never wanting to, having been the quote-unquote abused religion that picked on people, you never wanted to do something like that religiously to someone else. So I was very sensitive, and Paul was also, that someone should never think we were making fun of or insulting their religion. So in that way, the apology was warranted, but I don't think we should have done it, because we didn't do it with any intention of trying to malign or even thinking of Christ or anything like that in that angle. That was the furthest thing from our thoughts.
Right. We were just talking a little bit about who used to travel with the five guys and stuff like that, and brings me to my next question. How bad was drug use in the locker room?
It was very prevalent. We had a very loose locker room. I mean, the deal was show up for your match, be able to work that match. What you do before, after, I don't care. Mostly after, I don't care. But
right.
Don't go out to that ring screwed up so that you can't work that match. Now, were people smoking pot in the locker room? No. I mean, they would go outside or wherever, or cars, something like that. There was a tremendous amount of drug use. There's no question. I would say, without exaggeration, 65 to 75% of the locker room was heavily on drugs.
Wow. Was there ever a problem with Sandman working drunk and stuff with practice?
There were. Yes, there was. There were a lot of problems with Sandman back then. Unfortunately, Sandman at the time, besides the fact that we made him drink 5 beers on his way to the ring, he would have 15 or 20 on his way to the building. So by the time he got to the building, he was so drunk already that he and Cactus had a series of matches where they almost killed each other with steel chairs. I mean, they were just, and neither one of them would ever put their hands up. So, and in Sandman's defense, he would say, hit me as hard as you can. I'll take whatever you can dish out, but I'm going to lay it in too. You don't want somebody who's laying one in on you, and then when they go to return the favor, you're putting the hands up right away.
Right.
But yes, Mick came to me at one point and said, I won't work with Sandman anymore. He said, Todd, you and I get along great. He goes, but I can't work a match with Sandman anymore unless he's sober. And every time Sandman, we said, you can't drink anymore, and he had to go out sober, got injured. Every time he worked sober. It was only 3 times maybe in his whole career. All 3 times he got injured. And so now he had himself believing that he couldn't work straight, because if he did, he didn't go out there totally whacked, and sometimes he did. There were times he probably doesn't even remember going to the ring.
Right.
But there were other times when a lot of it was an act, where he'd go out there acting a lot more drunk than he actually was. But yes, he was a part. They were all partiers. I mean, look at the guys that came through. I mean, some of them, how many died of overdoses in our locker room? Eddie Gilbert, Brian Pillman, Louis Spicoli, Rick Rude. And what a great guy Rick Rude was too. But our locker room was filled with partiers. I mean, you look around, and everybody in there was a partier just about.
Do you think you lose credibility as a boss when you become too close with some of the boys?
You can, but I don't think I did. I think that you can lose credibility when you're so friendly with certain people that it affects your business decisions. In other words, if because I was so close to Sandman, I made him champ for 7 years, that to me is wrong. Sandman didn't win a match for 2 years. Not one match. No one knows that. He was the most over guy in the company at the time, and he did the job at every show for 24 months before he won a match. People would go, no, I used to watch that. He didn't win one match. So no, I think that getting too close was not a negative, only because, as I said, that initial core group and some of the further on ones, like Fonzie and all, are family to me to this day. I mean, I could never be back in the business again, and I know I won't go 2-3 months without hearing from half of this crew. I still talk to Shane. I still talk to Funk, as I said. I haven't talked to Kevin Sullivan in a while, because that was a little acrimonious the way he left, and a little underhanded the way he tried to take some of the talent away back with him to Atlanta. His wife, Sherry Martel, certain things he did back then, I didn't think were really above board. But the guys that I was close to and had a relationship with, they were real relationships. They've continued without them having anything to gain by still being my friend to this day.
Did any of the boys ever try to use intimidation with you to get what they wanted?
One person ever tried to do that. That was Ron Simmons. First night he was in. And I love Ronnie. But the first night he worked a show for us in Florida. I think he was making $500 a night. And he walked over to me. He's like, I talked to you outside for a minute. He took me outside, and I'm a small guy. He said, listen, I need 6. I said, 6 what? He goes, I need 600. Because you want me to go out there and do a job. Well, we had a rule that the first night in, everybody did a job.
Right.
And that made them equal. So no star was bigger than the company. No matter who that came in, everybody used to do a job on their first night. I said, well, Ron, we agreed on 5. I said, if that's the way you feel, I said, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say no. We'll just have to replace you on the card. He said, kind of leaned towards me a little bit, and I wasn't going to move. I just stood there. I said, well, what's going to hit me because I'm not going to give him another $100? It's ridiculous. And he said, okay, no problem. He goes, you're cool, and we respect each other. We went to the WWF to do the angle on Raw. He was the first person to run out going, Todd. So no one else ever tried something like that, but he was the first one to at least give it a half-assed effort.
Right. Do you think that your involvement with the wrestling business might have put a strain on your marriage?
There's no question. I mean, first of all, I call the wrestling business a marriage killer. One of the reasons I got out when I did was I was getting ready to remarry and was not about to let that marriage get affected. It's very difficult to be on the road and have your wife and kids at home so that they're feeling like you're out there partying, having the time of your life, and they're home doing all the drudgery, etc., etc. There's tremendous temptations on the road with women. I mean, you can't go anywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter who the guy was. You could be the ugliest, fattest wrestler in the world, and there's 20 rats who are still waiting for you in the hotel lobby because they couldn't get any of the higher echelon guys. So the temptations on the road, I think, I used to talk about it with Gary Juster, who said the same thing, and he was in just the promoting end. He wasn't even a wrestler in the locker room. It is a very, very difficult profession to have a successful marriage and be a part of. Very, very difficult. So yes, it impacted on my marriage, no question at all.
Was it a constant strain ever to work with Paulie?
Was it a constant strain?
I mean, did you guys...
There were times when we at the beginning, like in any relationship, it was all roses and hearts and flowers. I mean, the first year or two, it was just tremendous. When we disagreed on something, 90% of the time, one of us would concede. The perfect example was, I wanted Sandman to go to the ring with a cigarette. He said, "No way, we'll get kicked off TV if he's smoking at ringside. You can't do that." We fought. Finally, he gave in, and Sandman went to the ring with a cigarette, which eventually became the beer, and so on and so forth. And up until that point, we really had no problems. As the company grew, and the pressures and the stresses grew, we had behind closed doors a lot more headbutting. Never publicly, never in front of anybody, but we definitely had our differences of opinion of how to run the business.
Right.
Once we were together as a team, doing the booking part was great because we both saw eye to eye. How to run a business and how to deal with people within the business world, I'm used to that. He's not used to that. He's used to dealing with people in the wrestling world. I'm used to dealing with people in the business world. But the people we're dealing with, whether it be someone who's buying tapes in Japan or whether it would be whomever it may be, we weren't on the same page there, and that's where we probably butted heads the most and had the biggest strains.
Did Paul handle any of the business end of things when you were the owner of the company? No.
Not at all.
Is it true that Paul almost quit the promotion unless he was given part ownership?
No, not even close to true.
Okay.
In fact, wow, I don't know where that rumor even came from. I'll tell you how Paul. I actually, at one point, Paul had worked for almost 2.5 years without pay. He came down here every week. I said, "Paul, everybody's getting paid except you." He said, "When we make money, reward me then." And I gifted him at that time 49% of the company.
Was there ever a time when you did not begin to trust Paul at all? Or?
That's a difficult question to answer for me. I love Paul. I'll always love Paul, but there are certain things that he couldn't be trusted on. Whether it was me, whether it was one of the boys in the locker room, there were parts of him that you couldn't trust. I mean, would he steal from me? No. I could lay there dead on the floor with a $100 bill in my hand, and I know he could be in that room and leave, and that $100 bill will still be in my hand. So when you say trust, there are different levels of trust.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't mean I think he would steal from somebody or something like that. I mean, I trusted him that way implicitly. The boys trusted him with their careers. I mean, there were certain ways he was the most trustworthy person in the world. There were other ways, unfortunately, that he had his own demons. Maybe they weren't drug demons, but his own demons to deal with that, came back to bite him in the rear end, basically.
Can you elaborate on that, or you don't want to? Or?
Well, it's all a matter of trust.
Right.
It's saying something and having someone believe what you say and what you're saying not coming true. You can only promise for so long without delivering. If you make promises, you need to deliver on those promises, whether that means just being honest or whatever the case may be. I think Paul's in a situation now where hopefully, he won't be in a position where he has to be put on the spot to be dishonest. It's very difficult. You have to understand when everybody wants a push, everybody wants to be the best, everybody wants money, everybody wants this, and in order to keep them happy, you almost have to promise them things that you're not going to deliver on. I don't agree with that, but I understood it. But what I didn't, he and I are problems, I wouldn't be akin to it. I wouldn't say, go over and work Scorpio and say, "Don't worry, next month if you do this, we'll do that," knowing it wasn't going to be true. If I couldn't deliver on the promise, I wouldn't make the promise. But that being said, all I can tell you is that people still love Paul. If they thought he was a liar or they disliked him for whatever reason, for some reason there was something about him they still liked. And you had to either accept him as he was and move forward, or you depart. Some people couldn't take it, they would depart. But I accept him for who he is. He accepts me for who I am. I have my faults. And if you accept him for who he is and know what you got going in, then if you get burned, it's your own fault. So if I didn't trust him and I put myself in a position to get burned, then that was my fault. If I didn't trust him, I was smart enough to know not to put myself in a position to get burned. So I don't know if that elaborated enough for you, but that's pretty much how it is.
Did you ever get to the point when you realized you lost too much money and ECW could never become profitable?
No, I always thought there could be a day when ECW would be profitable. When I decided, when I was losing money, it was always towards the end of making money. You okay there?
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was able to come up with an exit strategy where I ended up having my money back. Did I make a killing in the business? No. But are the rumors true that I lost a fortune in the business? Not even close to being true. It did not impact my lifestyle one bit. I mean, I still drove the same car. I still, had the same lifestyle I always had. I didn't invest more than I could afford to lose. And fortunately, most of that investment, if not all of it, was returned to me in different ways, shapes, and forms.
Memories of your series with Bill Alfonso.
Oh, God. That was it. That was the one I couldn't remember. Bill Alfonso. I couldn't believe it. Here's a building full of smartest fans. Remember I said there was a second thing I couldn't believe? And these people, the first night we brought him in as a representative of the State Athletic Commission, bought it. Never saw it as an angle. There were people outside of the arena at 2 a.m. with baseball bats wanting to kill Fonzie. We had to sneak him out.
I remember that.
It was unbelievable. I was in an elevator at the Travelodge once because Fonzie and I used to get a suite, like a room next to each other, so the door could be open. And that was the big party hangout between me and Fonzie. And we were in an elevator coming down one day, and it was me, him, and a couple fans came on, and they saw us, and they went, "We'll get him for you, Todd. We'll get him." They started to go towards Fonzie, going, Todd, sir, tell him it's a work. Tell him it's a work. I said, "Guys, let me handle it tonight," because it was the night we had our match. I said, "Oh, I'll take care of Fonzie. Please don't, because you'll get arrested. I'll take care of this piece of garbage tonight." And I was like, oh my God. I mean, this was months into his run, and these people still believed he was from the state. They believed he was not part of the show. I mean, how people who are smart could believe it, but they did. And it took at least one or two shows for people who were really smart to say, "Oh, I get it, it's an angle." But at first people were like going, "Who's this asshole that the state sent down here?" It was great. Fonzie was tremendous in his role. I mean, we laugh with each other. I say to him, "I made you," and he says, "You made me," and we tease each other because Fonzie is still a very dear friend to this day. He's someone I keep a lot of contact with. But yeah, we didn't know how to work. To this day, I couldn't throw a working punch. So we turned to each other and said, "We're not going to be Jim Cornette and Paulie. We're not going to go out there and have people piss on us because we're all padded. We're doing an arm wrestling match, or we're taking the one bump and pretending to choke each other." Excuse me. So we said, "Let's just go out there and let's just beat the shit out of each other." And he said, "I'm game if you are." I mean, we worked out the match a little bit, but every time I swung at him. Every time he whacked me one of his Dusty Rhodes elbows or chops, because he used to love to do that, he was whacking me. I mean, when Taz would come out and hit me, I never felt a thing. He was I don't know how they did it. Could never throw a punch like that. He looked like he killed me, and I didn't feel a thing.
Right.
But Fonzie hit me. Oh my God! And when I hit Fonzie, I mean, to this day, he's still telling me at the time I hit him with the knuckle 3 times to the head, where he had this big lump on his head. But yeah, we didn't know how to work, so we were not going to let the people shit on us. We're not going to go out there and say those guys are just such garbage. I wasn't going to really miss seeing Francine rolling around on the mat. We wanted to go out there and have people. We wanted to earn the respect, just like we wanted to earn the respect of the guys in the back, and we think we did. I mean, we tried to do everything we could to make it real, and it was real, other than the scripted finish.
What are your memories going to the very first pay-per-view, Barely Legal?
Well, God, that was possibly the hardest month of my life leading into that, because everywhere we went there was a roadblock. There wasn't enough power to the arena. There wasn't a way to get the satellite hookup. Everything was a problem. I thought to myself, we're never going to get this show off. I was under such stress. I think I lost some hair. No, I'm not kidding. I was under such stress that it was like we were basket cases going to that night. And it's well documented. 10 minutes after the show ended, or 3 minutes after the show ended, the generator blew up, and we would have been off the air altogether. As it was, the show ran so long, the title match, which should have been 10 or 12 minutes, was 2 or 3 minutes. If you watch the very first pay-per-view, Barely Legal, the last match, you'll see I come running out at the end, and I'm running around like a jackrabbit at ringside going, "Go home! Go home! Go home!" We only had like 2 minutes where we were going dark. And these guys are still doing spots. I'm going, "Go home! Go home!" And no one would hear me. I was like freaking out at ringside. But yeah, that was an amazing feeling to accomplish that. I mean, think about it. You started out, like I said, 3 years before that, in Mike Schmidt's Sports Bar, with your main event being J.T. Smith and D.C. Drake against Larry Winters and Johnny Hotbody in front of 80 or 100 people. Now you're doing a pay-per-view. People all over the world could buy if they wanted to. What an amazing feeling that was. What a sense of accomplishment. It didn't matter whether you had won, lost, made money. It was such a feeling of pride in that locker room that night. Everybody hugging, tears streaming. It was real. The boys were streaming. It was so overwhelming, Rob. You wouldn't believe it. Imagine when you opened your first store. Right. You were a guy who used to come and you had 2 VCRs in your dad's place or something. All of a sudden you have a business. Well, in a second and a third. I mean, that feeling of accomplishment you must have felt. It's just translated over wrestling. It was an amazing feeling.
Was there any money problems right after the very first pay-per-view?
There were money problems from the first day.
Right. I mean, did it put the company more in a hole, or?
Oh, sure. Because you don't get your money from the pay-per-view companies for 120 days.
Right.
And the outlay has to be done at the beginning. So we just had to keep borrowing and borrowing to get to the next step. Then we get to the next level and start making money, but we're still paying off last year's debt.
Right.
And that was the problem
Catch
that
up.
Paul had. So Paul never could catch up. After I was gone, he was 97. He still had to pay 96. So even though he's making money 98, he's still
Right.
paying 97. By the year 2000 came, he couldn't catch up. He was buried. There was no chance for him to catch up. Short of taking in a partner who would bring in a fusion of cash, a network, whatever it may be, $5-10 million.
Right.
Because it had grown to that level.
What was your relationship at the time with the World Wrestling Federation?
That was another area where we butted heads. I mean, we had spent 2.5 years or 3 years on television telling everybody that the World Wrestling Federation was crap. Their product was crap. The wrestlers were crap. The shows they put on were crap. Now we're going to do an angle with them? And I was dead set against the angle. At that time, I believe it was 96 or 97.
90s.
Early 97. Right
Yeah.
before
Early
the pay-per-view.
97. I didn't own the company longer. So all I could do was give an opinion.
Right.
I wasn't the final say anymore. After May of 1995, I was no longer the owner of the company.
So you never really had any personal dealings with Vince? It was
No,
always Paul?
I usually dealt with JR or JJ Dillon or somebody like that, but I will say that Paul and I were in stark disagreement over that. I understood his philosophy. He wanted to get the notoriety where people who've never heard of ECW would hear of it. I don't know if that would have made him buy the pay-per-view from just seeing that one little angle on TV. Maybe it did, but I felt it was being disloyal to everybody who had supported us as being the anti-establishment group. If we're the anti-establishment, even if it's an angle, they know we're working with them, so it made us look like we're silents to me. And it was something I, to this day, disagreed with. I felt that it was, it's like seeing Paul now doing a commercial for Fram oil filters. I mean, it's so anti against everything that we stood for. I don't begrudge him. God bless him. I hope he makes $1 million and has a long, wonderful career there. He's entitled to it. He put in his time. He paid his dues like nobody did. I hope he makes $1 million, $10 million. But it is still weird to see the anti-establishment guy going, don't forget, Fram oil filters. I mean, it's just, it's hard. And that's the way I felt doing that angle with the WWF. And there's another thing. When we did the pay-per-view and invaded here in Philadelphia, Vince never told anyone in his locker room what was going on. The whole locker room almost came out and killed us. They wanted to rip our heads off. Somebody beat up Fonzie. One of their security or cameramen, when Fonzie jumped the railing with Taz, started beating him up. Fonzie's like, holy shit, this guy doesn't know what's at work. And he was pounding on him. And it was insane because he didn't smarten up anybody. Vince is a brilliant wrestling mind. Oh my God.
Were there any times in the early years that ECW almost went out of business?
Just about 500 or so, yeah. I mean, we lived month to month for so long. I'd say we lived month to month from 95 till they went out of business. I mean, it was, how many tapes did we sell this month? Or, what new deal can we cut with another net with somebody who's going to pay us cash from Japan? Or it was always just waiting for the next deal to come to get us afloat to the next stage.
Right. Since it was pretty obvious now that Paul had a relationship with the World Wrestling Federation for the time ECW was around, was the whole Revolution motto and ECW against the World Wrestling Federation a big work on the fans, or do you think it was a marketing scheme? Or
No, it was, well, I think at the time, it was certainly a marketing scheme. I mean, it was never a work on the fans. One thing we always did respect was the fans, and we respected their knowledge. Paul and Bruce Pritchard were always good friends. They had this relationship that went on forever. In fact, I can remember Stevie Richards or somebody when they went up there one day telling, Paul would know when someone entered that building within 10 minutes after they entered the Titan Towers. It didn't matter who it was. I couldn't tell you who the pipeline was. 10 minutes later, he knew someone had been there. Stevie Richards was there today. How do you know? He just left. He already had someone call. So he had his sources everywhere.
Right.
Where he got them from, God only knows, but he had them. And I know Bruce came to some of our shows, Bruce Pritchard, but no, it wasn't a work. I don't think his goal was ever to join with the WWF. His goal was to be Vince.
Right.
He wanted to be the king. He wanted to be Vince. And, in failing at that attempt, he couldn't beat him, so he joined him. But no, he was never secretly trying to, suck up to the WWF while we were crushing him on TV. I'm sure Vince was pissed off that we were going on TV and trashing his product and telling people don't watch it.
Why do you feel Vince worked with Paul, if that was the case?
I can't answer that question. I don't know. The relationship between Paul and Vince is something that's between Paul and Vince I've never understood. I've always said to Paul, why? I don't understand the relationship between the two of you. Paul felt that Paul was like him when he was young or something like that. I can't tell you what the real story is because who knows what the real story is.
Right.
Maybe Paul's pictures of Vince. I have no idea. But no, he always had the relationship with him. I dealt with Bischoff and we dealt with WCW. We dealt with them before we dealt with WWF. I mean, we brought in Pillman and Austin.
That was my next question. What conversations have you had with Eric Bischoff?
The first conversation I ever had with Eric Bischoff told me he was a bad businessman. I had never spoken to this man before. I was friendly with Gary Juster. I wanted to do some talent exchanges. I called Gary. Gary says to me, I'm going to put you on with Eric. He's going to, he's going to see if we can do something together. Eric gets on the phone. Hi, I'm Eric Bischoff. I said, hi, I'm Todd Gordon. He said, let me ask you a question. He said, you ever planning to run Tennessee? I said, beg your pardon. He goes, because if you ever want to run in Jim Cornette's territory, I'll give you Sting for free. I'll give you this one for free. I'll give you my whole roster for free just to put that piece of shit out of business. Now, he never once said to me first, by the way, are you friends with Jim Cornette? This guy could have been my cousin, could have been my brother. I thought, what a dumb thing to say to somebody. I mean, you got to be a moron to say that to somebody who doesn't even know you. And right away I said, okay, I know where this guy's coming from right off the bat. This guy's a bad businessman. You just don't do that. So we made the deal for Austin. I think Austin got hurt, and we ended up bringing Brian Pillman in his place. And then we went with the whole angle with Pillman, which, just blew up in Bischoff's face and Kevin Sullivan's face. Like the Benoit angle blew up in Kevin Sullivan's face. I mean, had a lot of angles blew up in his face. Yet he was still the luckiest guy in the world. He's still sitting home collecting $300,000 a year. Well, there's no company to work for it. He's been sitting there collecting it for the last 3 years. So Kevin will land on his feet again somewhere, and he's a smart guy.
What was your reaction when you heard Raven was going to WCW?
I was disappointed that Scotty was leaving. I thought Scotty had more of a future with us than he would there. I thought he would get lost there. They gave him a much bigger push than I thought they would. But even with anybody getting a push, they never knew how to follow through down there. They never had the wherewithal to finish an angle. I mean, I'm still waiting to see Baby Doll's pictures of Dusty Rhodes. And they just never followed through with anything. They just were so insulting to the fans' intellect. It's one of the reasons I started in the business in the first place. I hated being insulted. When I grew up, I believed Bruno Sammartino was out there. I couldn't wait till the next Saturday to see when they announced the following month's matches at the arena, whether Bruno was going to still have the title or not. I wouldn't know because I wouldn't go to the shows as a kid. I believed it. I mean, it was so unbelievable. It was garbage, and they were so insulting. I mean, they just didn't care. They just didn't care about the fans at all, and that was the wrong way to go about it. Our fans gave back to us. We gave to them. It was, like I said, it was a synergy. It was a team. It was a team effort with the fans, and nobody had ever done that before. I'm proud of the fact that at other people's shows in the WWF and WCW, when one of our guys does something, they still yell ECW. What a compliment that is. It's like the ultimate compliment. My God. Like saying, to me, that's like saying, thank you, Todd. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I mean, that's a way of them saying thanks. And that means so much. You'll have no idea.
What led you to call Terry Taylor in WCW?
Okay. I knew that story was going to come around that sooner or later. At the time, Perry Saturn wanted to jump. He was getting ready to jump. There was a lot of disillusionment amongst a certain core of people. That core being Sabu, Rob Van Dam, Sammy, and Fonzie. I decided at that point, it was early, just before, I'm going to say mid-97, because it was September when I left. So it's around the summertime. We're doing an outdoor show in Trenton, New Jersey. And that was the night. They all came to me. They said, we're quitting. We're leaving. We're et cetera, et cetera. We're all going to go get jobs. And I said, listen.
What was their reasons for wanting to quit?
Each person had different reasons. Some had personality conflicts with Paul. Some felt they'd been lied to and betrayed. Some was about just making more money. Everybody had a different reason. And I said to them, they said, you helped Teddy and Johnny, and I did. I called Kevin Sullivan for Teddy and Johnny. It's probably the first time I ever said that publicly. When Paul hears that, it'll probably be the first time he ever heard that. But as I said, they were my friends. I wanted to see them get ahead. I said, if these guys didn't want to be here, I said, you don't have to be here. This is about being a family. If you want to go up on your own, go off, go. My blessings. Do it the right way. Don't leave without telling us. Give us our notice so we can write you out of the angle, or do an angle to get somebody else elevated while you leave. But I don't blame them. So they all wanted to leave. So I called Terry up. I said, Terry, there's a couple guys who are very dissatisfied. Would you be interested or would Eric be interested in bringing that group in as a core group? He said, tell me who the names are. Wrote a couple names up. As soon as I said Sabu, they were very anti-Sabu because he'd been there once before and wasn't as cooperative as they would like them to be. I said, well, it's a package deal. These guys really want to go together. I said, if you want to do something, I can try to see how we can do this the right way. He said, are you part of this? I said, no. I said, I'm going to leave the business. I told Terry, I said, I wouldn't mind a fee for being the broker here. I said, but I'm going to leave the business. At the time, Paul and I were having some problems between us. Is the best way I can put it. And we talked one time. And out of that grew this storyline. With even Paul coming saying, I don't know what's going on, but there's this rumor that my whole company's jumping ship. And it wasn't the whole company jumping ship. It was 4 people. I mean, the Dudleys, Taz, Dreamer, nobody else was a Shane. Nobody who to this day tells people he was offered $300,000 to be part of that deal when there was never any numbers talked, and he never talked to anybody. I mean, it grew. Like in telegraph, telephone, telewrestler. I mean, my God, this story took on a life of its own. Now I realize, wow, this could work to my advantage. One, it gives me an exit strategy where I'm not the terrible person where I was saying I don't want to be here anymore. So I use this as a leverage for an exit strategy. Two, if I wanted to return ECW as a talent, I could come back as the heel who sold the company out, the bad guy.
Right.
And Paul and I, almost as recently as a year and a half ago, or a year ago, I should say, we're still talking about that angle. I was supposed to come back one night and they were going to do a tribute to the founders night, where my wife and I were going to get in the ring. They were going to give her flowers, made it look like a real shoot. Right. They were just thanking me for starting the company. All the referees are going to get knocked out. Then it's supposed to be Sandman against Mike Awesome. Mike Awesome had a manager,
Jeff
that
Jones.
goofy kid, Jeff Jones, a jerk. Anyway, so they wanted to douche him off. We wanted to get rid of him. So what we were going to do was I was going to come in, be on the top stage with Paul during the last match. There's no referees left for Awesome against Sandman. Everybody pretty much knew my relationship with Sandman in that audience in Philadelphia. There's no referees left, and they were going to point, like, come on, you do it. And I was going to beg off, no, I'm not going to be the referee, no. Finally, they're going to force me to do it. I come down, and I said, just, I'm going to be fair, Sandman. I got to be, open. I was going to put the referee shirt on, and then I was going to fuck Sandman at the end of the match and hit him with his cane. I was going to be Awesome's manager. That was one of many different angles we almost did along the way when I almost came back. So everybody thought there was this great big heat between Paul and I. There wasn't. I mean, I had to get out for a lot of reasons. A lot of personal reasons and some professional. And I needed to stop traveling. I just had to get out. So the whole thing with Terry Taylor was just really an exploratory phone call that then I allowed to let it blossom. And as I saw it blossoming, I saw, wow, I saw opportunity. And so therefore, once I talked to Paul, I said, look, let's let this thing go, and we'll see what we can do. And if we want to use it down the road, we will. And that's how we left it.
What was Terry Taylor's reaction to this idea? And what killed the idea?
Well, I guess what really killed the idea was Eric Bischoff said he wanted to negotiate with everybody individually. And I wanted to make it a package deal for the 4 or 5 guys so nobody got screwed. I wanted, if they were going to go, they were going to all get included kind of thing. He didn't want Sabu. And then Saturn jumped on his own and flew to Atlanta the next day and cut his own deal separately, which already threw a bottle of monkey wrench things into the works. Where now he'd cut a separate deal. Now a precedent had been set for a dollar amount, which took all the strength out of the negotiating tactic of doing the invasion angle. It wasn't, like I said, it was just a phone call. And it was one phone call back to him saying, Eric says he's interested in some, but not all the names.
Right.
And he'd like to negotiate with them individually. And I said, well, that wasn't the deal. I said, if he wants to do that, then I'm going to step out of it. And I did. And it never was any big mole in the dressing room. I mean, oh my God, the way it was built up, I couldn't have written a better angle. It was like, my God, I'd have had more heel heat if I came back to that building 2 months later, 6 months later, than Bill Alfonso did when he first got there. And that's what we were going to do. At one point, they wanted me to come back and say, I was there trying to get people to leave. Say, come on, you'll come with me. I got an in with Bischoff. I can get you out of this company. That was going to be the other angle. I mean, we were going to draw a lot of heat with it, but it required traveling. Paul said, are you willing to come back and travel? And I said, no, I'm not. He said, then we can't do the angle. So a year later, we considered that. And each time we considered more and more, but everything always involved me having to go back on the road. And at that point, I just didn't have it in me anymore to go back on the road. I'm a little older now. I just didn't feel like taking the bumps anymore. I still had the aches and pains from 911, who didn't know how to quite throw you down properly on that choke stand. I guess you would remember that yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, we sold a little better than Dreads did.
Right. Oh, you got right back up.
There's a guy who got a fan in the audience who's in this wrestling school who uses a plant in the audience, takes a choke slam. The guy turns around and Dread stands up and starts to walk back to his seat. Al, who's one of the strongest human beings, by the way, 9-1 in the history of the business. This guy is strong. I mean, like, scary strong. He grabbed me and said, if you want me to, I'll make it so you don't get up. don't get up this time. And Dred's laid there. Like, I can remember one time when 911 and Taz almost got into it in Florida.
I was going to ask you about that. What happened?
And then, Taz liked to be the tough guy, but 911, grabbed him by the throat and jacked him up against the wall and literally had his feet dangling and said, brother, you don't want to go there. And you didn't want to go there with Al. He was crazy. Al was also hilarious. I can remember being on an airplane with Al, 911. And he could captivate people. He'd have an audience around him in no time. And I come back to the seat and he's sitting there and he goes, yeah, my first wife died from poison mushrooms. And all these people are going, oh my God, you're kidding. And he's got a crowd of people around him. He goes, you're not going to believe this. I got married again and my second wife died of eating poison mushrooms. Now he's got people crying. And he's sitting there and he goes, yeah. He goes, my third wife died of a concussion, a blow to the head. And I goes, you're kidding? He goes, yeah, I couldn't get her to eat the poison mushrooms. I mean, and the plane, he just had them all, he just had them eating out of his lap.
Right.
I mean, everybody had their routine. Johnny Grunge is famous one. Same thing. He'd get people going crazy. He'd get people in a group, he goes, oh my God, the craziest story happened last night. He said, I was getting this blowjob from this hooker, and all of a sudden I looked down, and it's a guy, he's playing with himself. Do you believe that? And everybody goes, oh my God, what did you do? He said, I told him, as soon as you're finished, I'm going to kick the shit out of you. I mean, so everybody had their own special little routines that were their classics that you just remember forever.
After the whole entire thing with WCW and Terry Taylor, did anyone treat you coldly after that? Or did you lose any friends over it? I remember
no.
stuff about New Jack.
New Jack was...
He was never involved with that.
No, New Jack has... So in fact, even to the end, New Jack was still calling me to have him, when he was leaving Paul, say, please call Paul, and New Jack was in here 2-3 months ago. No, New Jack was not a factor with that. The people that got angry with me were the quote-unquote New York clique. Dreamer, Taz, Paul's little core group. And unfortunately, there was some of that towards the end there, where there was sort of the original guys, my Philly guys, and the New York guys, and that was kind of a shame. Although it could have been a hell of an angle had we done the Philly versus New York thing at one point when their fans were doing it on their own, where I could have been the babyface in Philly and Paul in New York and vice versa. But he never wanted to be a heel again. So he didn't want to do that angle with me because he didn't want to be a heel in Philadelphia. So yeah, they were upset, and then Taz went out and did an interview. And he did it for the Sheets, where he said, oh, I was this terrible person, and da-da-da-da, and so on and so forth. And Sandman went out and did an interview where he just douched off Taz.
Right.
Taz said, why'd you do that? He goes, because that was a receipt for what you did to Todd. Todd put money in your pocket. Todd was losing money giving you a job. Where the hell do you come off doing that? And Taz, give him credit, because to this day we still talk. He called me up like a man. He said, I want to apologize to you. The only reason I did it is because Paul told me to do it. He said, he told me that everybody's been doing these interviews, and it turns out I'm the only one who did it, so he hung me out to dry. I was wrong. I owe you an apology. I said, apology accepted, and I talked to Taz as recently as, 2 months ago. I told him about his kids and his new baby, and I think his wife's pregnant again.
Right.
Yeah, so all that heat's gone. I never made peace with Tommy because I never saw Tommy again. Or Bubba. I didn't see him again after that. I don't know if there's heat there or not. But unfortunately, they only got to hear one side of the story. They didn't really know what was going on. But everybody else, to this day, like I said, that whole rest of the crew, Stevie Richards is in here all the time because he lives in Philly.
I was going to ask you, one of my questions was, what was it like having the office upstairs? And Stevie was working there.
Stevie Richards was working here using some kayfabe name upstairs.
Lloyd.
Stevie Richards was Lloyd. I used to love it. He goes, Lloyd there? I go, hold on. Stevie, it's for you. He and Gabe Sapolsky worked the office up there. One time Ed Zahn worked up there. Richard Freeberg worked up there. We had at one point, we had a ton of people working up there, like 6 people.
Right.
That's not a ton, but those were the ECW offices in Philadelphia. Stevie's a great guy. I love Stevie. He had a chance to be the next Shawn Michaels. Unfortunately, he got really severely injured where he had those terrible, the neck and the back. And he says he's healthy now. I just hope to God that now that his group's being broken up, that there's no old ill feelings with Paul, that he still gets a push, because Stevie is a very talented kid. He, personality is regardless. I like him as a person. Whether somebody else does, I can't tell you. But I think he had the potential to be a tremendous talent. Tremendous talent.
After you left ECW, how did the idea of the angle with Dennis come about? And were you well accepted to that?
Who was the go-between between Dennis and I? I'm trying to remember who called me up about that. Boy, I do go brain dead a lot. It's all those years on the road with the Sandman, I think. Someone contacted me because Dennis would never have called me on his own and said, what do you think about doing an angle with Dennis? I said, you gotta be kidding me. I said, I couldn't do that. I said, everything I ever did in ECW would be like undone if I did something like that. It's not if it was an ECW angle. Why don't you get your original crew together? Because Teddy and Johnny were out of work. 911 was out of work. Brian Lee was out of work. Kimono was out of work. They said, if you do this, all those guys will be working again thanks to you. I said, okay. I said, but I'm not going to do it cheaply. Because number one, I hated Dennis. And number two, I said, I'll be business about it, but he's got to pay me. So I asked for a strong number, to be honest with you. And he agreed to it. The deal was, because there was no trust between us at all, he had to pay me every time in cash. He had to pay me before the show started, or I wouldn't come in the building. And he'd think it's my wife who used to come to the shows with me, my current wife, beautiful wife. And I gave him a great angle. And this thing had the potential, had he known how to promote it right, to be unbelievable. He would promote it on the ECW television show that's running on a Saturday night on Channel 48 while his show was going on. That's when he bought commercials. Never passed a flyer out, did nothing. We had a great angle where, we were going to be, when I first started the angle with him, the idea was, I knew we'd get the initial pop, but it also gave me the reason I agreed to do it is because I wanted a chance to verbalize a lot of stuff that I never gotten off my chest before I left the business. There were people I wanted to say things to.
Right.
Dave Meltzer. I mean, I had a hard on for him for years, and I wanted to let everybody know what a piece of garbage he was. I mean, there were a lot of people that I wanted to get my 2 cents in on. He was one of the mainstays of that. You okay time-wise there?
Yeah, oh yeah, I got 10 minutes on this tape.
So I hand-fed Dennis an angle, and all the ECW guys there is 911, Brian Lee, myself, Public Enemy, and it was a great angle with the hood. No one knew it was me. They thought it was Teddy. We did a good angle for him. Brought Missy in, Kimono in, and I started to realize that there was no way he was ever going to be the baby face in this angle. I said, holy cow, I mean, this is never going to work. I mean, we're not supposed to be the baby faces.
Right.
And it's great to be a heel baby face, but that's not what Dennis was looking for. Dennis wanted to be, Dennis the Great. So I said to him, here's what we'll do. 50th NWA anniversary show, which is a big show. I said, that night, we'll flip. I'll end up having Doug turn on you and Missy turn on me, and you'll end up with Missy and Stevie Richards, who were the 2 most popular of my crew. I forgot Stevie was part of that group too. I said, I'll end up with Doug, who's not that over. So it'll be me, Doug, Brian, so we can get more heel heat, and you'll have the 2 baby faces on your side. So I said this whole great angle for him, which was going to culminate in the last night, which would have been at the Eddie Gilbert Memorial, where Doug and his family, basically I didn't get killed by all of them. Doug was eventually going to turn back to his family, and Doug, his parents, Missy, they're all going to just, and Dennis were all going to just beat me around in a circle. So I was willing to, do the job at the end and get killed and let them all just come in. But it was a really well-crafted, long-thought-out angle that could draw big money. And the night of the NWA convention, Jimmy Cornette got in Dennis's ear and said, why are you letting this guy get over on you? Why are you letting this guy be up all the time? And then Jimmy Cornette understands an angle. He knew what the finish was, that Dennis was going to come out strong. He goes, I'm not doing any angles where Missy gets hit and this and that's bullshit. And Dennis said, this is going to be the last night. We're not going to do it now. We're not going to do that the way we were going to do it before. You and I aren't going to be in the match. We'll be outside. I said, what are you talking about? I said, we had this thing scripted and crafted. I mean, down to the letter for 2 weeks. Howard Brody was sort of there. He's in, kind of trying to be a go-between. That was a convention where Dennis and his son were passing out cards with Howard Brody's phone number on it. I mean, we're talking about a mismatched organization that whole group was. But, the angle could have worked. It was done with Paul's blessing. I said, Paul, I want you to know I'm going to go out and do an ECW angle. He said, do whatever you want. He said, if you're getting paid? I said, of course. He goes, do it. I said, I'm getting paid good money or I wouldn't do it. So he had no problem with it. I mean, we used to laugh about Dennis. And then, like I said, this is the 4th show, which was the NWA 50th convention, and he tried to change it. I said, Dennis, I said, I said to you from day one, if you ever try to screw me, I said, I'm just going to walk out. If you don't pay me, I told you I'd walk out. If you try to do it, I said, I'll walk out. He said, well, I got your money. I said, well, guess what? I don't want your money. We promised these people a cage match, 5 against 5, or War Games, or whatever the hell it was going to be. They want to see you and I go at it. I said, now you're telling me you're going to rip them off and not give them that. I said, I'm not going to be party to that. I said, I don't care if it's $1,500 or $15,000. I don't want your money. I don't need your money that bad. I said, so let them have the gig. I said, and I'm out of here. Got up, in fact, it was with Sandman that night, and our wives, we had a drink at the bar, we left. But Jim Cornette was a shit stirrer who stirred that whole thing up because he always resented the fact that ECW made it when Smoky Mountain didn't. Smoky Mountain was the darling of the sheets until ECW came along. Then Smoky Mountain was just some southern hick wrestling, which wasn't as exciting anymore. But they were over for a while because everybody else sucked. But as long as somebody only didn't suck, that was actually better than them, he was, out of his mind, And God, doesn't New Jack tell us stories about him giving them the envelopes with the checks that weren't signed, or the envelopes that didn't have the checks in them at all. I mean, he was like a scam artist. And then he had Dennis in his back pocket, and Dennis did whatever he said, so Dennis killed the goose to lay the golden egg. He should have understood, even though he was outlaying money, he would have gotten money back in the long run, but he couldn't be that farsighted.
Right. As of today, do you have any aspirations to ever start up again?
No, I've been asked, oh my God, including when WCW was being sold.
Right.
I won't mention the name of the group that came to me, but one of the groups that was interested in purchasing WCW asked me to be the lead man for the group. I asked what was involved, and what basically was involved was going down to Atlanta for like 4 weeks and through the whole due diligence process. And I said, I don't want to do it anymore. Howard Brody from Florida, another one, who called me up as recently as last week or 2 weeks ago. Please, why don't you invest in the NWA down here and you'll run the company for me? You got the blueprint for how to do it. I was contacted by the people out in California who I would have nothing to do with because I found their act at the pay-per-view really classless.
Right.
I mean, I said, you couldn't pay me enough money to come out and run your company for you. I've been asked probably 5 or 6 times by people willing to spend money to come in, but I'd have to give up everything I'm doing to give my full attention to start their company, or at least be a consultant, to be this, to be that, and I turned it down every time.
What are the biggest misconceptions about Paul Heyman?
What are the biggest misconceptions? I don't know what misconceptions are out there. Give me a misconception, I'll tell you if it is a misconception.
I don't want to say it. I just wanted to see.
Well, I don't know what's a misconception. I don't know what people conceive that you think they're conceiving incorrectly.
I don't know. I was just going to ask you.
If they think that it didn't hurt him to fold that company, that would be a misconception. If they think he took it lightly, that he was, owing people a lot of money, that would be an incorrect assumption. I can tell you as a personal friend of his that it hurt him. He struggled with it. He is trying to do the right thing by some of the guys. He got Spike in. He got Rhino in. He let Justin go without giving him a hard time. But by the same token, he can be just as vindictive, to whether it would be a Sabu or this one or that one, who he did have heat with. But I do know that it was a very difficult thing for him to go through. And it's hard to give up your baby. I mean, when I left in '97, it was hard to give up my baby. And that was my baby. It wasn't Paul's baby. It wasn't Eddie's baby. It was Todd Gordon's baby. I was the guy who put his ass on the line and went out there and got no credit. It was always called Paul Heyman's ECW. Well, it wasn't. He was the booker, and not even at first he wasn't. But I never stood up and said, "Oh, that's bullshit. It was my idea to this, and I never got credit. I didn't need the credit. What feeling of success I had inside from what I accomplished, I'm cool with that. Friendships I made, I'm cool with that. I don't need somebody, Wade Keller or Dave Meltzer, to go, oh yeah, he was a flag. Todd Gordon was the one who changed the face of wrestling. But the bottom line is, ECW did change the face of wrestling. It changed the whole sport, and it changed it forever.
Definitely.
You never saw a woman get hit before until an R ring. You never saw a shoot interview before. You never saw the internet used before. You never saw any of the things that you saw, the chairs, the tables, flaming tables. None of that stuff had ever happened before ECW came along. So I take tremendous amount of pride in what I accomplished, and I don't need anyone to raise the flag for me.
What do you think was Paul's long objective term?
To become Vince.
All right.
Paul always wanted to be Vince. It's just like Eddie always wanted to be Jerry Lawler. Only Paul kept set his sights a lot higher.
Right. Do you think Paul Heyman has been given unfair treatment publicly by the boys in the sheets and protecting him?
The boys have protected him, I think.
Do you think they are protecting him because
I think because they're smart enough to know that they bury him, they'll never get a job in WWF or WCW, which is now one and the same.
Right.
I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to go bury somebody who you're going to ask for a job somewhere down the road. So I think the boys have been prudent in not burying him, smart in not burying him. Now, I'm hoping that he holds true to his word and that he can get Sandman in there in the next 6 to 12 months, because that's something he and I kind of promised me. Because when he was having his problems at the end, he would call me up from the road. I mean, this is like within the last 12 months now, and say, I got a problem. I got to go into this locker room tonight, and I got to tell these guys I don't have paychecks for them. A, how would you approach it? Because we respect each other's opinions. B, would you be willing to get involved and maybe talk to Sandman and have him stand up, and be the locker room leader? And I did that. And so I was, believe it or not, helping Paul behind the scenes all the way up until the last day.
In interviews, you said that one of the reasons you left ECW was because of the overworked hours. If that was true, Why were you trying to get a job in WCW?
I didn't try to get a job
You
in
were just
WCW. I asked for a finder's fee for putting together the deal.
Okay.
I wanted to get off the road entirely. I never had any intention of. If I wanted to still work, I would have worked at ECW.
Right.
I mean, I was making money then. I was being paid to perform as opposed to being someone who, and being paid to do duties as opposed to someone who was risking any capital. I wasn't losing any money. I just was looking to get out, and on my way out, I thought I could grab a payday on the way with me. But I never had any intention of going to work and actually be on TV and travel again.
What is the current status with the fantasy camp idea? Is it on hold or is it?
We had to put on hold. We had 25 people send in deposits at $500 a piece, which is $12,500. So that would have been, I guess, $40,000. We were looking for a not break even. We were looking to do 50 to 60 people minimum to do the camp. 25 people sent deposits. Never cashed one check. That's just the way I am. Send everybody back their checks once we decide not to run with it. I was shocked because I tried to go for a mixture of people. But oddly enough, everybody in the business, to a person, called me up and said to me, "This is the most brilliant idea anyone's ever come up with. I can't believe we didn't think of it first." Zane Bresloff just called me last week, and Barry Fox, who apparently were WCW promoters, who now are going to do the same idea in Chicago with their four horsemen, with Ric Flair, Barry Windham, and Tully. And this person is the fourth person. Only they want to do it where they put somebody else's body in there, and at the end it's you, and they're going to have a stunt double, whatever. Gary Juster called me and asked if I considered taking it on the road, because the concept is a great concept, but I overpriced it. I took it as to be like a baseball fantasy camp, and I used their pricing to use my pricing. And it was the concept was having dinner with the wrestler and being in a match. You would learn how to work a match. Rocco, the Public Enemy, was building me a special ring with extra padding. I think the concept was great. The pricing was wrong. I was shocked because I tried to put a little somebody in for everybody. Kurt Hennig and the Road Warriors, the old WWF crowd, and maybe for the women. Sabu, Funk, and Sandman for the hardcores. But nobody who sent their money in wanted the Road Warriors. One person did.
Right.
Nobody wanted Kurt Hennig. Nobody wanted Scorpio. Nobody from the South wanted Tom Bridges. They all wanted. They were all ECW fans.
Right.
They all wanted Missy Hyatt to walk out with them. And they all wanted Sandman, Sabu, or Terry Funk.
That's
and I remember when I called Terry Funk and pitched him the idea. Besides saying it was a great idea, he said to me, "What am I going to do? What am I going to do if 100 people pick me? I can't wrestle 100 times in 2 days." I said, "Terry, not 100 people aren't going to pick you, but a lot of people did pick him." Oddly enough, he was somebody they wanted to work with. But unfortunately, the camp was overpriced. But I may do it again, maybe next year at a lower price. We'll see.
Is there any other angles that you regret doing in ECW?
Any angles we regret doing? I didn't even regret. There's no angle I regret doing.
Right.
I mean, obviously the fire angle, which was a disaster.
Right.
But that wouldn't even. That was just circumstances. I mean, the guy in the lighting box booth, who's underneath the audience, who couldn't see, fire going on when he hit the lights, because that was what he was just doing his cue.
Right.
The moron who worked at the ECW arena, who found a 75-year-old fire extinguisher and then came out and shot it towards the audience, and all it shot out was this heavy, thick smoke. I mean, it was just all,
Right.
I don't regret the angle. It wasn't you.
What?
No, it wasn't you.
Okay. Nah.
No.
Because he was out in the shoot.
No, there was that guy, Dan Minoko, or something. He's the one who ran out there and grabbed that fire extinguisher and shot it towards the audience, and it was an old, beat-up extinguisher. So, even though that was a disaster, I don't regret the angle. I mean, I don't regret the bombing angle that didn't go off. I mean, I can't think of one angle I regret. I think a lot of our angles were so cutting edge and so fresh, instead of rehashed old stuff, that I love that. I like the fact that we were different. I mean, there was stuff that people hadn't seen done before, instead of just redoing some old angle that Dusty and Flair or Bruiser and Crusher had done, or whatever, Bruiser Brody had done years and years before that.
What do you think of the job Steve Carroll did in running the business after you left?
I can honestly say that Steve Carroll's a piece of shit. I think he's a piece of shit as a human being. I think he's a piece of shit as a businessman. He didn't do my job. He did a job, a function. I think that he's very lucky that someone in the locker room didn't kill him, because he had an arrogance about him that was almost looked at boys with disdain. One night I had to keep Sandman from killing him. I just find him a despicable human being who I think from day one thought he was going to get this company away from both me and Paul, and he was going to make all the money. And I think that after I left, he had Paul at a disadvantage, because he had positioned himself in a way where Paul needed him to do things, and without him he would lose X, Y, Z. So Steve Carroll set himself up in a nice little capper seat where he was making money and just, as far as I'm concerned, sucking Paul dry.
Are you still dealing with any lawsuits after ECW ended?
No.
When you left ECW, what were your dealings with Paul like?
They were the same as always. I mean, he would call me up and say, "Hey, listen, what do you think about this? So and so, called me. He asked me to be an intermediary in a number of situations. And there was a time when we tried to keep business out of it altogether, where all our conversations were strictly family related. I spoke to his mother today. Strictly on, she called me close to her, said, "I talked to him a lot. What's going on? How are you? I like Paul clean shaven, that kind of thing." So we have a great relationship. We never did. People who thought, we couldn't work together any longer, but it didn't affect our friendship. Once we weren't working together any longer, it wasn't a problem. I mean, there's only so many times, you can say, whatever. As far as I'm concerned, like I said, I wish him nothing but the best. I care for him. I care for his family. He knows, like, I'll call him up to tell him a story about one of my kids. You won't believe what one of my kids did.
Right.
Which one? And that's the way we talk. We talked when he first went to the WWF. We talked before he went to the WWF. But I'd like to think that he respects my business acumen enough that he bounces a lot of things off of me, including when he declared bankruptcy. He wanted opinions, and I give him my opinion. Doesn't mean he's going to use it or follow it, but he still always asked for it. And I respect his opinion in a lot of ways.
How much influence did you have on booking ECW right before you left?
Before I left, almost none. Between 93 and 95, a great deal.
What about the business end of things before you left?
100% up to 95, maybe 50% from 95 to 97. I started delegating out of authority.
Did Paul ever try to swerve you on anything as far as ideas or anything, or no?
Yes. Specifics I won't get into, but they were never angles or wrestling related. They were business related.
Okay. Who was your favorite ECW employee and least, and why?
Wow. I couldn't tell you I have a favorite because my favorite would probably be, there are probably 7 or 8 that I would say are my favorite. And right off the top of my head, I would go through Teddy, Johnny, Sabu, Sandman, Fonzie, Scorpio. And before I even got started with, there'd be the first names that would come out of my head. And I'm sure if I sat down and thought, I probably just missed 3 or 4 people. You know what I'm saying? Least favorite employee? Well, Curtis Hughes would be right up there. Who else did I not like in the locker room? That's a really tough one. There were very few people. I can't think of anybody I really disliked. I disliked Curtis. I disliked Steve Carroll. I don't know. Of the boys, very few, because really we only brought in the kind of people that we wanted to work with. I thought Pillman was a little bit off, to be honest with you. One night, me, him, and Sandman got alone in a room. It was just one of his first nights in. And we got to partying or something, and he started going into character on us. And we kept looking at each other going, this guy goofy or what? And he started talking about when he was playing for the Cincinnati Bengals. Now the guy would come to his door, who would knock on the door to see if you were cut or not, and he started getting the big eyes, and we said, hello? And he and I had a little heat because he thought that I went back to Kevin Sullivan and told Kevin that he was doing coke down there, and I don't know where that came from. But yeah, I mean, I didn't get along with him that well, but I certainly would never speak ill of anyone that's passed away. But no, I can't think of anybody I really didn't get along with or didn't like. But people I loved, to this day I still love.
What was your favorite match when you were in ECW, as far as watching or booking, or favorite angle besides the Sandman one?
The Sandman blinding angle is certainly that one. Fonzie as that State Athletic Commission guy was certainly right up there. Not because I was involved with it, just because I couldn't believe that people got so emotional about it. The surprises, the funk in the box. I used to love the surprises.
Right.
Funk in the box. I mean, it doesn't give better than that. And Sandman, give him credit. He went out and bought 2 pair of pants that no one else would. No one even would have thought of that. But he went out and got those red, white, and blue,
right.
Those horrible pants he used to wear. I got a pair for Funk to wear, so when we did the Funk in the Box, that was tremendous. Arn and Bobby, that was tremendous. I can still remember when they did the Mystery Partner, and Bundy hadn't been seen in years, and Funk came to the ring, and he brought out his mystery partner as Ian Rotten. And I was out there, and these people, we had built it up on TV for like 3 weeks, and the fans turned on me like that. You asshole, Gordon. I was standing right there along the wall. You piece of shit, Ian Rotten. And next thing you know, out come Bundy, and the place just exploded. But boy, they were so pissed when they thought Ian Rotten was going to be the mystery partner.
What do you think killed ECW?
A combination of, well, what killed it was the money. It could never catch up financially to its debt. So it could never get on an even footing to try to make money. And as long as it was playing catch up. And then, in order to compete, the salaries were expanded tremendously. I mean, guys who were making $300 a shot 3 years ago, were now making $3,000 a week, $3,500 a week, whether they worked or not. I mean, and you put enough of them together, that's a hell of a nut he was carrying. So I'd say really it was finances. It was nothing else but finances that put the company under.
What do you think could have been done to save ECW?
Not have expanded as quickly. I think that we should have gone market by market as opposed to going for the national hit right away. I think that we should have, if we'd have stayed with the business plan that I laid out, which was starting in the tri-state area and then moving on. Instead we went right to Florida. And which, taking a whole crew to Florida is expensive. I don't know, you think you went to the Florida trips. I mean, we started doing things that we weren't prepared to do just because the opportunity presented itself to us. So we thought, wow, MSG Network, that's big, but they're also $5,000 a week or $3,500.
Right.
But what if they don't want us a year from now? We got to say yes while they're offering it to us. So we started saying yes to all these offers that we couldn't resist, and taking our tour to Japan that we did, whatever we did, and so we never could catch up, and we grew way too fast. I mean, no one ever. I mean, how do you expand that fast? You can't. We didn't have the resources. Plus, we were still a mom and a pop shop. It was still me and Paulie. Out in the backyard, let's put on a show with the R Gang or something. I mean, the Little Rascals. I mean, here we were trying to run this major company, and we're doing it out of my little office here with Gabe and Stevie Richards upstairs.
All right.
It was crazy.
Do you feel that ECW or do you feel like a smaller promotion like ECW could last in today's environment?
Absolutely, as long as they don't try to become one of the big three.
Right.
But any promotion today, this is an ideal time to start a promotion. I mean, for goodness sakes, you have WWF is the only game in town. They come here twice a year.
Right.
Well, what are the wrestling fans watching live the other 10 months? They want to go to live events. So now's the time to start a promotion. Just don't have stars in your eyes and think that you're going to be, I think right now I could run that bingo hall every Saturday and do my original, concept and have a regular crew, a regular bunch of hands, and every Saturday run a show and make a profit. Would I be one of the big three or be, have a column in, the Observer and the Tours? No. But that wasn't the aspiration originally. It just happened.
Right. What are your future plans?
My future plans are pretty much to stay where I am. Hopefully I have my daughter now, and my stepdaughter is 23 now working here. Hoping that by another 10 years she'll be able to take over the business and I can retire and move to Florida. Maybe then I'll help Howard Birdie out.
Do you ever feel you'll run shows again in the Philadelphia area?
I don't think so.
No.
I've been approached so many times. I mean, especially about the reunion, the ECW reunion show. Everybody wanted to do that. They really want to run the arena big time. They really want to do it. Everybody's sad it went out with a whimper instead of a bang. Everybody wishes they would have had that one last kick-ass show, tear the place down. In fact, I told Paul when he told me about the Club ECW situation, because apparently he had sold Club ECWs before he went out of business for 4 shows. I told him, I said, run one mega show, a super show. Charge $100 a ticket, which takes care of the 4 Club ECWs. You honor your obligation. I said, and let's bring back everybody who's ever here, and let's just blow the roof off the place. But it never came to fruition.
It would have been incredible.
Yeah. I think with his relationship with Vince, we could have gotten that part of the crew back. Plus, we still had enough of the original crew. We could have done something spectacular. Last night, give them everything, leave it all laying out there, and that's the way ECW should have gone out.
I agree. I'm going to mention some names now, and you could just elaborate on them.
Okay, word association, huh?
Yes.
Okay, so they got their ink block test, though?
Yes. The Gilberts.
The Gilberts. I told you, I worked with Doug, and after all our problems with Dennis, and Doug was all business. Eddie, as I said, I feel sorry for him because he was so paranoid that everybody was out to get him, and I don't think anybody really was out to get him. But funny, I mean, he was a funny guy. He could just have such a good time with him when he was relaxed and being himself. He, oddly enough, was very political. He wanted to go into politics. He genuinely believed he was going to win an election down there where he ran for something, but he got kind of crushed. So the Gilberts, I have no ill feelings towards any of them. I have no regrets about bringing Eddie in. I feel sorry that he's dead. I mean, Eddie was a hell of a guy. Eddie, when Dennis was going to start his new NWA, called me up and said, "Hey, I have a great idea for an angle. run it by Paul. He goes, I'll get Dennis to put the belt on me. I'll throw the NWA belt again down, and I'll come over to ECW. But he was trying to, Paul didn't want him back in ECW. But he was willing to do that. He called me up, and it was his idea. He said, "Oh, Dennis will not. They won't know what hit him." He goes, "It'll be the second time he got his belt trashed at his tournament." He goes,
That'd have been great.
That was Eddie's idea. I couldn't even take credit for it. It was all Eddie.
Missy Hyatt.
Missy Hyatt. How do I describe Missy Hyatt? I can describe Missy Hyatt with this story that's not even wrestling related. Before she was with Jason Hervey, I knew Missy, from the business from Joel. She called me up and said, "Will you make me a gold charm?" I said, "Sure." She said, "number 12 for Jim Kelly," because I met him somewhere and he was wearing my Missy Hyatt t-shirt. It's like, okay, no problem. She calls me up like 3 days later. She goes, "Oh, is it done yet?" I said, "No." She goes, "Can you turn it into change it to a 32? I said, "A 32? She goes, "Yeah, now I'm dating." She gave me another ball player's name. Well, making a long story short, we changed this 5 times in less than 5 weeks. So finally she goes, "Can you put Jason on there for Jason Hervey?" And so I'll just leave that at that.
That's
And
great.
that'll sum up Missy Hyatt.
Vince Russo.
Never met Vince Russo. Was asked by Howard Brody to consider working an angle with Vince down in Florida, where he wanted to bring the two of us in together. So I can't really give you an opinion on the guy because I don't know him personally. Everything I've heard about him was mostly positive, but those were from people who he's pushing, like Shane Douglas and people from ECW that I still have a relationship with. I think that the fact that they let those 4 guys jump, Malenko, Benoit, Guerrero, because they didn't know how to use them in the first place. Not that Vince used them all so great anyway. They really only wanted Benoit.
Right.
So they kind of took everybody else's the baggage with it. I would say that I can't give you anything on Vince Russo.
The Sheet Writers. Dave Meltzer, Wade Keller, and Bruce Mitchell. I don't know if you want to address them individually or...
Talk to him individually. The reason I always hated Dave Meltzer is because Dave Meltzer refused to acknowledge our existence for years. And his hardcore base, the people who read his sheets, were our fans. And yet he refused to give us our due or our credit. Then he would, right after an arena show, he would but he would print out match results that were inaccurate. He never did his homework. And yet if you turn on a television show, a talk show where they were talking about wrestling back then, it would bring him out as the authority on wrestling. I thought, not only is he not an authority on wrestling, he never did his homework. The guy didn't give one rat's ass. All I cared about was Japan and Mexico, or in that time, Smoky Mountain, because he discovered it. But he was, I just felt that he was held up in such high esteem, that people gave such credibility to what he said in his sheet, that it just was horrible. He was just, he never cared. He didn't care about the business. He would write things about a guy's match, or, I've been in the ring, okay? That certainly wasn't a worker. I know what it's like to get knocked around. You know what it's like to get knocked around. For him to go out there after guys worked 40 minutes and say, "Oh, well, this is worth 1 star because he didn't know psychology." Dave Meltzer doesn't know psychology. The most green wrestler in the world knows more psychology than Dave Meltzer. For him to sit there and be so pompous and arrogant and so inaccurate as he was is horrendous. Bruce Mitchell, what can I say? Here's a guy who wanted to make himself bigger than life itself. So he became the story and tried to stop our first pay-per-view. And that's something I'll never forget. Calling up a pay-per-view company and saying, "Do you know about the Eric Koulas incident?" Well, who the hell is he? He's a sheet writer, but he's not a real journalist. He's writing for a bunch of wrestling fans. And he's going to make himself the story. I almost stopped the pay-per-view. I don't know. Wade, I never had problems with. Wade, I got along with. I think that he aligned himself with the wrong people. The fact that he aligned himself with the Mitchells and the Maddens of the world, he had the wrong people giving him advice in his ear.
Gary and Anthony, the Pimples.
Gary's still one of my closest friends. I just got him a job, in fact, with Noah in Japan through Too Cold Scorpio. Vader's the head American there, so I only have 3 Americans, Vader, Scorp, and Gary, and I got Gary the job. Anthony, I don't think Anthony's going to be much back in the wrestling world. I don't know he had as much to offer as we created. He's one of those creations of Paul's that was a creation more than anything else. I think that he had potential, but he also had demons to deal with.
New Jack.
I told New Jack years ago, because it seemed there were times when I was New Jack's only friend in the dressing room. The night after the incident in Jim Thorpe where he hit that kid on the head, the next day I was sitting in the diner across the street. I remember Taz and Saturn were sitting across from me. And New Jack came in and created not a friend in the world. And he said, "Can I sit with you?" And I literally was making a decision at that point. Am I going to alienate people by letting them sit with me? Or am I going to say to people, look, we're in this together. If somebody fucks up, that doesn't mean their history. So I said, sit down. And there was some heat over it because people didn't appreciate that after what he had done the night before, that I would have let him sit with me. But, I'm too good to be sat. I mean, I'm not, who am I? I'm so good, too good to sit with somebody. So I said to him, what you did last night was fucked up. You're wrong. But New Jack and I have always been friends. I've done stuff. New Jack and I have stories together that, like Sam and I, that I couldn't even tell you.
All right.
But we've always kept contact. New Jack's crazy. I told him years ago that he didn't need wrestling. He was a natural entertainer. He once went to a club and took the microphone, and I forget the name of the club. It was a mostly black club here in Philadelphia. Took over as the DJ, and he was phenomenal. He had people eating out of the palm of his hand. He was a natural-born entertainer. He didn't need to fight. His ego was such that he always felt he had to prove himself, and it's a shame because he really didn't need to prove himself. He was a naturally bright, naturally funny guy. One night he was on the radio, and I can remember we were sitting in there. He said, "You gotta listen to me. I'm gonna be on this radio show." And we're sitting in the room. It was me, Scorp, Fonzie, and Sandman. He goes, "I want to give a shout out to Scorpio, Fonzie, Sandman, talking. I know they're up there getting high in the room." I was like, "Can you just say that on the radio?" This guy, is he nuts? And then New Jack's a good guy. I tried to help him out at the end with Paul, but it was to no avail. He's a man of principle. He may not always be right, but he believes in his principles, and he believes that if he's right, that nobody can make him think otherwise, and he stands by his principles. He didn't have to leave ECW when he did. He did it on his own volition.
Francine?
There would be somebody that I could have added to the list of courtesies that I never really cared for.
Really? Why is that?
I felt she was very ungrateful. I gave Francine her break. She came in here one day with her dad, right here in this office, to sign up. I had JT as her trainer. She ended up going off the Rockin' Rebel and stopping her training, letting him finish her training, which was not part of the deal for whatever personal reasons. I felt that I heard that she had said a lot of unkind things, and I would have thought she would have been someone who should have been grateful that she got the opportunity she got, and her ungratefulness I find very distasteful. Therefore, she's not someone I really care for very much.
Beulah?
Beulah was a sweetheart. Beulah was not meant for the wrestling business. She was a very nice person. She and Tommy were a great couple together, but she was never cut out for the wrestling business. She was all TNA, and yet she hated doing the TNA. She loved the hoots and hollers, and yet she hated the hoots and hollers. She was very, she had a lot of mixed emotions, but was a very nice person.
Paul Heyman?
Paul Heyman is someone I'll be friends with till the day I die. Plain and simple. Paul Heyman, I hope to God marry someday. I love to see him get married and have a real normal life instead of having the kind of life that he's carved for himself. I mean, he's carved out a life that he works the last 7 years, sometimes 16, 18-hour days, and I feel sorry for him. I wish he could get a normal life to go with that, but I think he thinks they're mutually exclusive and can't have one without. They can't have them both at the same time, and it's a shame because you can, as long as as long as you're able to balance it. I couldn't. I mean, like I said, it's hard to be married and be in the business, and it's hard to be married to someone in the business because invariably they're off with somebody else. I don't know anybody who's in the business with their wife whose wife didn't cheat on them, or vice versa.
Right.
Nobody. And I won't go into names, but you think of all the couples that were married that went through my dressing room, you'll figure it out for yourself.
What was the greatest rib you've ever seen?
Greatest rib? The Battle Royal one was pretty good. One of them, I guess, would have been in Ron Jaworski's Eagle's Nest, where Sandman, Rebel, and some other guys were in a Battle Royal and they stripped Stevie Wonderful butt naked, which was his last day with the company because Eddie had it with him, and he was pretty pissed. Like back when we were driving off, so he threw his underwear at my car window as I was driving off the fairgrounds that day. Of course, it cost us Ron Jaworski, who didn't want to do any business with us anymore after that. Our reputation cost us in a lot of places. Like I said, we lost all the hotels. We're not allowed in the hotels. We're not allowed here. We're not allowed there. We were definitely the bad boys. But there was something cool about being the bad boys. I mean, there was something cool about being the rebels. I was a rebel growing up. I mean, when I was in the 70s, I had an afro. But it's true. I wasn't always a 46-year-old man. I was once a 22-year-old man who, I was a hippie back then. So the way I looked always offset the way I really was, and I was able to balance both worlds.
What was your favorite show you ever promoted?
November to Remember '95. That was my fight with Fonzie. That was our first real match. It was the first time I ever went out. Instead of just doing an angle with him, I actually worked a full match with him.
And I remember they were both nervous. I remember that I know that all of the boys were crammed around that monitor. They were all dying to see what it was going to look like the first time. So we really didn't want it to screw up. Although maybe the better one may have been that tag team match with Raven and Stevie Richards against the Pitbulls with the two referees.
Right.
Fonzie never refereeing, and that's the first night I ever got color, and the only time I ever got color. But it probably November '95 is my favorite night because that was just. In fact, I just showed that to my 9.5-year-old son maybe a month ago. I don't let him watch any of my old tapes yet because he's only 9.5. But he said, I just want to see once what you look like when you were in the ring. So I showed him that tape. He said, oh my God, look at Steve Austin. I didn't realize that Austin was on that show with the blonde hair down to here. He said, oh my God. I mean, it was just like he was startled. You couldn't believe he was freaking out watching it. So that was kind of fun. And when he's older, I can't wait to watch all this stuff.
All right.
Thanks to you. You made me all those tapes of the TV shows. Right before I left. You gave me like 4 years of television.
I remember.
When he's like 13, I'm going to sit down and we'll watch it all together. And I'll owe you that thanks for that because you were always so nice to me and giving me that kind of stuff.
How do you want wrestling fans to remember you?
I hope they'd like to remember me as, you know, and it seems like a lot of them have forgotten me, but I hope they would remember me as the guy who started the revolution. I mean, I may not have been the front person for it because I let Paul be the guy out in front of the cameras. You know, he was the long hair, he was the wild man, but I hope they would remember me as somebody who said, wrestling sucks now. Let's change it so people like it again. And ever since then, all over the world, people like it again. No matter where they're watching a different product than they were watching when I started in 1992. So if I single-handedly or as a group had something to do with changing the sport itself, that's what I'd love to be remembered.
In closing, is there anything you want to say to your fans out there that are watching this?
I would love to say, hey, thank you guys so much for keeping this company alive as long as you did. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to live out my dream, to fulfill my dream. To not only just be a wrestling fan, but to live every wrestling fan's dream, to be the guy who puts on the show. And their support is what enabled me to do that, and I'm eternally grateful to all of them.
Do you have any-